Okay, so I kind of realized that you guys truly do love full story videos. And honestly, that's a great thing. And the reason why, because I want to make sure that you guys are still hyped up as we work our way through our coverage over the X-Men, but work our way over to the next big X-Men event we have to cover. And that would be Onslaught. And so I kind of realized I could do two different prelude full story videos to kind of keep you guys hyped up until we are able to properly dive into the next X-Men event. Now, this prelude video that leads into Onslaught is all about Gene Nation. Now, Gene Nation was a brand new organization that just popped up right after Age of Apocalypse, but it's also the beginning process of bringing the Morlocks back into the picture, but also to use the Morlocks for bigger storylines down the road. And so in this full story video, you're going to see me take a bunch of smaller videos and combine them together into one big video to kind of give you the idea of who Gene Nation truly is, but also at the same time, working our way up to the Onslaught crossover. And so with that being said, I do hope you enjoy today's full story video. Okay, so getting back into our coverage over the X-Men, we're going to pick up with Uncanny X-Men issue number 322. Now, with issue number 322, we're getting into the idea of working our way up to the Onslaught saga with the whole idea of the Juggernaut being defeated by, well, Onslaught. And you see what I mean as we go through today's storyline, but we have to transition over to Archangel first to kind of get reminded of what the world is like right now when it comes to our heroes after Age of Apocalypse. And so for Archangel, we're seeing him meeting up with a character known as Detective Jones. Now, when it comes to Detective Jones, her and Archangel had dated in the earlier parts of our coverage over the X-Men. When it came to Archangel, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Iceman, and Beast, when they were still part of the whole X-Factor team, you had Archangel date her for a very short period of time. Now, here's the thing. When he had rejoined the X-Men, he had technically moved on and, of course, fallen in love with Psylocke. And so for Detective Jones, she does kind of have some hatred towards Archangel because he technically just disappeared and never called her for like 4 months straight. But she called him out because she needs his help with some kind of situation. And so when he does arrive, he realized that one, she's still mad at him, but two, you now have humans begin to hate on mutants even more. And here's the reason why, because as we saw in X-Men Prime, you had Trish Tilby tell the entire world that, hey, listen, the legacy virus is a big thing going on right now, and originally it was only attacking mutants, but now it's attacking humans as well. And so for the humans, they're kind of like, oh, this brand new virus had just popped up because of the mutants, and now there's a possibility that we can die. And so you now have the humans begin to hate on the mutants even more. And so because of that, you have Archangel alive, and you have some police officers wanting to shoot him or possibly just kill him because of what he is, because he is a mutant. Now, for Detective Jones, she has to show Archangel what had happened inside this facility because she believes that this attack was done by mutants as well, to kind of hint at the idea that mutants and humans are now going to war. And right now, both sides are okay with the idea of attacking one another. And so you have Detective Jones show Archangel what happened in this building, but unfortunately, we don't get the chance to see what is being shown to him. But now we have to transition over to Storm. Now, technically, we're going to use Storm as a way to explain what's going on with two different X-Men characters, starting off with Gambit. Now, like we saw in X-Men Prime, when it comes to Gambit, unfortunately, he's in a coma. And the reason why, because at the end of Legion Quest, you had Gambit and Rogue kiss one another because they believed the world was going to end. Now, technically it did, but thanks to Bishop, the world was saved. And so when Kanan, Rogue, and Gambit, they still kiss, and it put Gambit in a coma, and you had Rogue run away because she was then able to look into his mind, and apparently she saw something in there. But either way, for Rogue, she's also now missing. Now, for Wolverine, he's also there at the school of Charles Xavier, but he's hiding out in the woods. And the reason why, because, well, there's two reasons why. The first is that because of Sabretooth. Because of Sabretooth right now staying in the school of Charles Xavier, because Charles believes that he has the ability to fix the mind of Sabretooth. For Wolverine, he does not want to stay inside the building at all as long as Sabretooth is around. But also, it's Wolverine telling Storm that he feels like he is changing into an animal, becoming more savage and less manlike. Now, before Storm is able to continue on with this conversation, you have Siren appear, because at this point in time, X-Force is staying with the X-Men. But apparently, Cable and Charles Xavier had just finished a conversation about something very important, and now they want to see everybody. And so you have Storm Lee, Wolverine, behind. Now, this begins the whole idea of us getting into the Onslaught saga very soon. And the reason why I'm saying that, because while you have Bishop and also Beast leaving the movies, out of nowhere, they see something falling out of the sky. Now, that something, or really someone, does crash through the entire area they are in, just wiping out the entire street. And so for Bishop and also Beast, they got to see what in the world is going on. And so when they go to the crash site, they find the Juggernaut. But here comes the big problem. The Juggernaut is supposed to be an unstoppable force. Well, something did stop him and sent him flying across the country, because apparently he was in Canada, on the other side of Canada, but now he's in New Jersey. What in the world had hit him that hard? But before we're able to learn more about that, we have to see what Jean Grey is up to. Really, Jean Grey and Cyclops, because you have the two characters paying a visit over to her parents, where you have Jean Grey informing her father that her sister, his other daughter, is dead. Now, we had learned that back in the Phalanx Covenant storyline, and technically it was Marvel just trying their best to tie up some loose ends, because her sister went missing a long time ago. I mean, like the early days of X Factor, when it was Cyclops, Jean Grey, Iceman, Beast, and Angel. And so with her being missing for so long, it kind of seemed like Marvel had completely forgotten about her. And then someone said, hey, did we ever wrap that up? And they did say, hey, she was killed off by Karen Hodge a long time ago. But it's Jean Grey telling her father, like, hey, listen, she died. And really, for her father, he kind of already knew. It's the whole idea of parents knowing that there's something wrong with their child. And so you do have him walk away, but you can tell that this man is officially broken about the idea of losing his daughter. Now, Cyclops, he was there as well, but you do have Cyclops and Jean leave to head back home. But while they are leaving, they don't notice that they're being watched by some mysterious character. Now, apparently, this character is very impressed by our heroes. The whole idea that they have gone through a lot in their entire life, but they still push forward, but also how they came together to make a strong relationship. And he's kind of hoping they stay strong for what's to come down the road. And we have no idea who this character is. Now, the rest of this issue is really more of us just seeing Beast, Bishop, and also Psylocke trying their best to figure out what exactly happened to the Juggernaut. Now, he does wake up. When he does wake up, he goes on a rampage. But you do have Beast and Bishop and also Psylocke kind of work together to bring him back down once again. Honestly, it's kind of cool for Bishop because this is his first time meeting the Juggernaut, and you have Bishop being able to bring him down. But after doing that, you have all three characters as Juggernaut like, hey, what happened to you? And he said, hey, I was in Canada, but apparently now I'm in New Jersey. Where it hit me, I mean, fly across the entire country. But you have Beast ask him, like, who hit you? What hit you? And so the book ends on the note saying, Onslaught. And so this begins our coverage leading into that event with this one book alone. Okay, so it's time for us to, well, cover some more Wolverine comics as we work our way up to the Onslaught saga. Now, we're going to cover two different comics. We're going to cover Wolverine issue number 91 and Wolverine Annual 1995. So, going to cover both stories in that annual plus issue number 91 to kind of help us with our coverage over the X-Men. So, when it comes to Wolverine around this time in Marvel Comics, we have to remember that he no longer has the adamantium on his bones, but it's now Larry Hama kind of do something different and new with the character of Wolverine, kind of changing the whole idea of the character. And you can see what I mean as we go through today's storyline, because you do have Charles Xavier explain to us what he had discovered about Wolverine and his mutation. Now, when it comes to Wolverine issue number 91, it's technically picking up where issue number 90 had left off at. But here's the catch, because between those two issues, you had two major events happen for the X-Men. The first was Legion Quest, and the other one was Age of Apocalypse. Those two X-Men events happened between issue 90 and issue number 91. But in issue number 90, Wolverine finally came back home, except when he did, he had to watch over Sabretooth, because around this time in Marvel Comics, when it came to Charles Xavier, he believed that he could fix the mind of Sabretooth, turn him into a good character. Now, the X-Men were away because they believed the world was going to end. And so they kind of left Wolverine to watch over Sabretooth, which honestly is a horrible idea. But you had Sabretooth being able to get into the mind of Wolverine by saying different things about his past. And so for Wolverine, he lost control. And so he had stabbed Sabretooth in the head. Now, technically, with the healing factor of Sabretooth, he did survive, but apparently it was only barely. And so you had Wolverine kind of stay out in the woods as a way to kind of stay away from the X-Men. Until Sabretooth leaves the school, Wolverine will not go inside. But also there is another reason why he's kind of staying outside of school in the woods. But before we're able to learn about the other reason why, we kind of see that for Wolverine, with him being out in the woods, he kind of get the chance to see all the different neighbors that Charles has. Like, for example, there's a family nearby, and you have the kids coming back home with a bunch of flowers to give to their mom, who apparently got injured. But we're kind of left to believe here at first that the husband is possibly abusing the mom, and the kids have no idea because they believe their mom is just very clumsy. But Logan is watching the family, and he knows what's going on inside of that house. Now, for Storm Beast and Charles Xavier, they're kind of wondering, like, how in the world can they help out Wolverine here? Because for Storm and Beast and Charles Xavier, they kind of realize that Wolverine is way worse than he was when he first joined the X-Men. When he had first joined the X-Men, he was somewhat rough around the edges, but he got better. But the way he is right now, he's way worse than he was back then. Now, it's also Beast pointing out the fact that Wolverine is acting more like an animal rather than a man. And so it's them kind of wondering, maybe the animal side of Wolverine realized that he's better off in the woods. Because what if he goes berserk? What if he does go berserk and kills somebody in a school, somebody he cares for? And so it's Beast, Storm, and Charles saying maybe that animal side kind of realized he's better off staying in the woods away from us as a way to protect us. And I kind of like the idea of how this does affect all the different members of the X-Men, especially for one character, and that would be Jean Grey. Now, at first, we see Psylocke picking up on the thoughts of Wolverine and kind of realize that his thoughts are all over the place, dark, scary, like in the red flag area. But you also have Jean Grey with Psylocke and Cyclops as well, because they're having dinner together at the home of Cyclops and Jean Grey. But let's not forget that for Jean Grey, she loves two guys, Cyclops and also Wolverine. Now, technically, we could say three, because Archangel as well for a brief moment. But either way, for Jean Grey, she still believes that the man she loves is still inside Wolverine. Like, Wolverine may be acting different, but his heart is still the same. He's still the same person. It's like her believing that no matter what, the old Logan that she had fallen in love with will come back out soon and everything will go back to normal. But the problem is for Wolverine is that he's having a hard time trying to push out the darkness in his mind. That darkness is beginning to take over. It is kind of hinting at the idea that the animal side is taking over, because you didn't have Wolverine howl like he's some kind of wild animal in the middle of the night. And every single person can hear the howling of Wolverine, but it's also like how the different characters of the X-Men are trying to handle the situation going on with their friend Logan. Like, they don't know how to help him out. But we're also seeing that sometimes for Wolverine, he may not be able to just howl out his feelings, that sometimes he has to attack. He has to let out that rage by doing some damage on something. So we see Wolverine just cutting down trees left and right as a way to release all of that anger or that animal stuff inside of him to hopefully calm him down. Except now we kind of see Charles Xavier and James Hudson kind of explain to us what exactly is going on with Logan. And let me explain, because this all has to do with Weapon X. As we all know, Weapon X kidnapped Logan and gave him adamantium on his bones and gave him metal claws and made him a very cool character that fans loved. But what if they had technically saved Logan, but on complete accident? Let me explain. Because for Charles and James Hudson, what they're saying right now is that when it came to Logan, once he became a full-on mutant with a healing factor and bone claws, apparently his mutation was always going to be like this, to turn into some kind of wild animal. But when it came to Weapon X, when they had added the adamantium on his bones, it stopped the process, allowing Wolverine to just be a man. But thanks to Magneto ripping off that adamantium, it allowed the process to continue once again. And so technically right now, what we're seeing is the X-Men and also Alpha Flight saying that the only way to technically save Logan is to find a way to re-add the adamantium to his bones. Now, the ending for Wolverine issue number 91, it really does kind of end on a very interesting note, but the last few pages, it goes back and forth between two different settings that then collide together at the very end of the book. Because while you have Charles, Beast, and Storm go out of their way to confront Logan, we see that family once again, where you do have the wife trying to call the cops because, well, her husband is very abusive. And so while she's trying her best to fight off her abuser, you have Charles, Storm, Beast trying to explain things to Logan. Now for Logan, he kind of tells our heroes like, hey, listen, before I got the adamantium, my mind was a wild place. And technically that is true. But he also says the adamantium kind of helped relax my mind a tad bit. But when it came to Magneto ripping off the adamantium off my bones, I kind of had to figure out how to live a life all over again now without the metal on my bones that I had for a very long period of my life. Now, for Logan, it's also him turning down the idea of going back home to the school of Charles Xavier to hear out Charles, to hear out James Hudson on a way to save his life. Because right now, he's just so focused on taking out that abuser, but also because he feels like he's not safe around the other people at the school. Now, once you do have the wife run out of her house to get away from her abuser, you have Logan get the jump on the abuser. Now, it does seem like at first we're going to see Logan just kill off the abuser for what he is, being a guy who abuses his wife and possibly his kids as well. But you have Beast being able to stop Logan. Now, sadly, we see the wife begin to protect the abuser, kind of like, hey, listen, we know he's being bad. We know he's an abuser, but it's her saying like, he does not understand how to show love to me nor the children. So it's her she is protecting her abuser once again. Now, you do have Storm try to tell her like, hey, listen, there are centers you can go to get away from him. But for her, she does not want to leave. Instead, she wants to stay with her abuser. And so she does. Now, for Charles, he also invites Logan to come back home. Logan says no. And the reason why, because again, he feels like there's no hope in him turning back into the man they used to know, the man they used to love, but also as a way to protect them as well. But now we kind of have to get into Wolverine annual number 1995. I have no idea why I just said number 1995, because when it came to Marvel Comics in the early days leading up to 1990s, when it came to a annual, they had their own set of numbers. So for example, we had covered Uncanny X-Men annual number 18, I want to say. But by the 1990s, they kind of dropped the numbers and say, you know what, this annual came out this year. So, for example, we're covering Wolverine Annual 1995. So you know what year it came from, but also this is an annual. Now, with all that being said, usually in annuals, you would get like 2 or 3 stories for one book. And so in this one, we have 2 different stories that are somewhat important for the character of Wolverine. Now, for the first one, the first story is technically a callback to the early days of Chris Claremont X-Men. Let me explain. So back in Uncanny X-Men issue number 96 and issue number 143, there was this Karen that appeared in the middle of the woods near Charles Xavier's school. Now this Karen was kind of like a portal to a demonic realm that allowed a demon-like character to come into this reality. And his main goal was to take over this reality. Now the first time you had Storm just blow it up, and we're left to believe it was officially gone. It reappeared a second time, but once again you had the X-Men get rid of it. Well, now it had reappeared a third time, but now one of those demons from that realm has basically used that Karen as a portal and now arrived on this reality plane. And so now you had a demon heading over towards the school of Charles Xavier. And for Logan, luckily, he was able to track down that demon. And so now we're picking up with the idea of Logan fighting against the demon as a way to protect the people who are inside the school of Charles Xavier, the rest of the X-Men technically. But inside the school of Charles Xavier, we pick up with the X-Men, but also Boom Boom, and also Nightcrawler as well. Now, around this time in Marvel Comics, Boom Boom was part of X-Force, but X-Force was currently staying with the X-Men for a short period of time. Now, for Nightcrawler, he is the leader of Excalibur, but he came back home to spend some time with his best friend, and his best friend is Wolverine. Now, this is also Nightcrawler hearing what's going on with Logan and kind of feels bad about the idea that they're not out there in the woods looking for him and trying to bring him back in as a way to help him. And so you have Beast tell Nightcrawler like, hey, listen, like, he has to handle things on his own. He'll come to us when he is ready. But for Nightcrawler, he's kind of wondering, what if we're too late to help him? What's going to happen by then? Now, that is when the alarms go off. And the reason why, because it's Logan fighting against that demon. Now, when you have our heroes like Charles Xavier check the cameras, they don't really see anything. And for Charles, he had to reset the security system because for Logan living out in the woods, he would always set off the alarms. And so the system should not be picking up Logan at all. Now, you do have Charles use his abilities to kind of read the minds out there in the woods. He finds Logan, but he also finds the demon mind as well. And when you have Charles how to read the mind of the demon, he does somewhat remember this demon, but not completely. And honestly, he's not really able to get a full picture of the mind he's kind of reading at the moment. And so you have Charles ask Psylocke to use her powers kind of help out with the situation. But the problem is that by the time you have Psylocke try to help out to figure out what's happening out in the woods, you have Logan and also the demon go inside the cairn into the demon realm. And so, of course, they don't pick up anything at all. But of course, it does freak out Nightcrawler. And so he goes out there. And when he does, he realizes what has returned because he was there the last two times this Karen had appeared. And so you had Nightcrawler also go inside the Karen as well into that demon realm. And so once you have Nightcrawler go inside this realm, it's Nightcrawler kind of realizing that one, they're now in some kind of demonic realm, but two, is him finally seeing Wolverine be this savage character that the rest of the X-Men had warned him about. Because when he does arrive, all he sees is Logan right now fighting against demons and killing them off left and right. And so for Nightcrawler, he's kind of happy about the idea of being able to work together with his friend, but he's also realizing that Logan is being a savage, that Logan is trying to make sure that every single demon in this realm is going to die. And once the battle is over, for Nightcrawler, he wants to go back home to warn the rest of the X-Men about what just happened. But for Logan, he does not want to go back home. He wants to stay right here and continue to fight, but also find the leader of the demons to finally kill him off. It's kind of showing that right now, this is a man who's just being a savage animal at the moment, who just wants to fight, who just wants to kill. And with that healing factor, he's going to continue no matter what. But now we get our first look of the demon leader of this demonic realm, and that is a character known as Key-Rock. Now, when it comes to Key-Rock, he's actually the leader of this demon realm, but we don't know his full origin just yet. As a matter of fact, when in Kingdom Marvel Comics, they didn't really explain his entire origin until later on when it came to the Scarlet Witch in her books that came out many years after this one in the earlier one. So unfortunately, we don't know everything about this character. All we know right now is that he is trying his best to leave this realm to go over into the main Marvel Universe realm. And so right now, he's overhearing what's been happening to his fellow demons, his henchmen. And he's kind of like, hey, you know what? That is not okay at all. I hate the idea of my demons being killed off by Nightcrawler and Logan. Now, technically, it's just Logan, but for him, he's hearing and seeing the two characters in his realm, Nightcrawler and also Wolverine. Now, getting back over to Nightcrawler and Logan, you have the two characters having a conversation. And honestly, I kind of like this conversation because it's really more of Nightcrawler trying to point out that for Logan, he's worried for Logan. But it's also Nightcrawler trying to make sense of all of this mess that Logan is currently going through. But for Logan, he's not really trying to make sense of any of this. Matter of fact, it's really more of Logan saying like, listen, I get it. You guys are scared of me. You guys are scared of the fact, the possibility that I might make you guys look bad because I'm out here turning myself into some kind of killing machine, going after bad people and actually killing them. But it's also Nightcrawler saying, no, you don't understand. We realize that, yes, we are afraid of the possibility of yourself losing control, but at the same time, you're also scared of losing control, turning into some kind of animal. And you had Logan say, no, I'm not afraid to admit it. Like right now, I feel my mind slipping piece by piece, bit by bit, into a killing machine, the man I'm supposed to be. But you didn't have Key Rock appear. Now, when Key Rock's appear, he's kind of like, hey, listen, the last time we battled Logan, it was on Earth, but now you're in my realm. And so this allows me the chance to finally fight against you and most likely defeat you. And so now you have Logan just trying to fight against Key Rock. Now, Key Rock is showing Logan that he's not somebody to play around with, but at the same time, so is Logan, because Logan has a healing factor. Logan is a savage at the moment. This man will not stop until he is able to kill off Key Rock. And unfortunately for Key Rock, he's now realizing that he might have made a huge mistake, but he believes that he can keep Wolverine and Nightcrawler busy long enough to allow his fellow demons to begin to invade the Earth. And so they're now heading over to the Earth realm to go attack the X-Men and the rest of the Earth. And for Nightcrawler, he wants to leave to stop them, but for Logan, he does not want to leave. He wants to stay behind and continue to fight against Key Rock. But you didn't have Logan and Nightcrawler agree to go back up to fight against the demons that Key Rock had released onto the Earth. But again, it's Nightcrawler showing us, not Nightcrawler, it's Logan showing us how savage he is at the moment, just killing off these demons left and right. Now, for the rest of the X-Men, the security system does go off, but this time for Charles Xavier, he can feel the minds of the demons. He can feel the minds of Logan and Nightcrawler, but also Key Rock as well. So he's like, hey guys, listen, I need all hands on deck because I now remember what's out there, and occasionally comes back. It's Key Rock in that goddamn Karen. Go out there and fight against those demons. We gotta stop them now. Now, the ending of the storyline is pretty funny to me because you have Key Rock technically admit that he's giving up, because the reason why he had released those demons onto Earth was to basically grab Nightcrawler and Wolverine away so that he can then close the portal to his reality, because Wolverine did some serious damage to him. It's him saying like, hey, I gotta give up. That dude right there was too hard for me to defeat. So you know what? Let me go ahead and admit it. I lost, but don't worry. Next time, I'm going to be able to defeat you, Wolverine, and the rest of the X-Men. Now, you do have the rest of the X-Men appear, right? When they do appear, they find Nightcrawler. And it's Nightcrawler saying like, Logan is worse than he ever has been before. Like, it's Nightcrawler really being scared of Logan. But the question is right now, where is Logan? Well, he ran off. He's back out there hiding in the woods. So we're getting another example of the idea that sooner or later, we might see Logan just be a savage animal out in the woods near Charles Xavier's Institute. Now, the next story we have to talk about involves Maverick, where you have Maverick just crash his aircraft on the front lawn of Xavier's home. And so you didn't have Wolverine walk over to make sure that Maverick is okay. Now, the last time we saw Maverick, he got in the legacy virus. And I know you guys are probably tired of me explaining what the legacy virus is, but just in case you have anybody, trying to get into comics, let me just go ahead and explain what the legacy virus is all about. The legacy virus came from the future thanks to Strife. He brought the virus to the past and released the virus out into the world. Now, at first, the virus was only going after mutants, and that was really it. But then out of nowhere, it began to go after humans as well. Now, technically, there's only one human right now who has the virus, and that is Moira Taggart. But for Maverick, he has the virus, but he's trying his best to hang on. Now, the last time we saw him, he wanted Logan to go ahead and kill him off. Logan said no, and you had Maverick leave. But now here's Maverick just laying out on the ground in front of Logan. We also kind of find out that some kind of hidden organization was able to grab Deadpool, and they kind of believe the possibility that Deadpool might have the cure for the legacy virus. So right now, he's a prisoner, but also being used for an experiment. But getting back over to the school of Charles Xavier, we're seeing Beast being that doctor character, being able to bring Maverick back to health for a good point where he's able to walk again, but also being able to communicate with Logan as well, to explain to Logan what in the world is going on. Now, this kind of leads into the part where you have Logan say, hey, Maverick, why are you here for? Like, are you here for me to kill you off because you have the legacy virus? You have Maverick say no. Instead, he needs Logan's help because apparently somebody is going after him, Deadpool, and also Wolverine, and possibly anybody else who was involved with Weapon X. And let me explain why. Because they believe the healing factor, they might find a cure for the legacy virus. Now, technically, we're not really told the name of this group at all. But the thing is, they believe the cure for the virus could be inside of Wolverine, Maverick, or possibly Deadpool. And when it came to Maverick, when he came back home, he was attacked. Now, at first, I believe the person who attacked him had to be a Reaver. And technically, it is not a Reaver. See, as we jump back over to those scientists who are testing on Deadpool, we kind of find out they also hired a character known as Slayback. Now, Slayback was one of the early day villains for Deadpool who unfortunately fell into the back burner area of Marvel Comics because he barely pops up in Marvel Comics. But for Slayback, he was somebody who was supposedly killed off by Deadpool in the past, but of course has survived, but also gave himself some cybernetic body parts to kind of help him get revenge against Deadpool. In an earlier storyline, he tried to use Copycat as bait to get to Deadpool to hopefully kill him off. Again, all took place in the past. But when it comes to Slayback, he is working for the scientists. Now, the ending of the story does get wrapped up very quickly here. And the reason why, because you do have Maverick and Wolverine head over to the scientist base. And when they do arrive, you do have our heroes being able to free Deadpool. But right after freeing Deadpool, you did have all three characters begin to fight against a character known as Slayback. Now, for Slayback, while keeping the heroes busy, it allowed the scientists to escape. But before they did escape, they had started a self-destruct sequence. So the entire place is going to blow up. Now for our heroes, they jump out the window. And technically this base kind of hanging on the side of a waterfall. So they have a long drop, but right after they do jump out the window, the place does blow up and we're kind of left to believe that Slayback is dead. Now for our heroes, when they do get to the ground level, Deadpool had disappeared, but S.H.I.E.L.D. had arrived. You see, for S.H.I.E.L.D., they're trying their best to gather enough evidence to move on that group of scientists to hopefully bring them in. But thanks to Wolverine and Maverick, they kind of ruined those plans. Now, for Maverick, he was really wondering, is there a possibility that Deadpool might be a cure for the legacy virus? Okay, so we're at the point where we're going to see the end of Avalon. And this is a massive storyline because Avalon has been around for a good while by this point in our coverage over the X-Men. But also, we're getting into the idea of another character being able to come over to this reality who had left the Age of Apocalypse reality. And technically, I had forgotten about this character because I remember the Sugar Man, Dark Beast, X-Man. And the thing is, there is a fourth character who had also arrived in this reality. And that character is going to be responsible for the end of Avalon. Like, that's how crazy this story is. Now, just in case we have anybody who's just running our coverage over the X-Men, when it comes to Avalon, it was this space station that was kind of put together by Magneto in the early 1990s. You see, for Magneto, he kind of got tired of the idea of fighting against the humans for the rights of mutants. So he said, you know what? How about this? We'll just leave. And so he built a space station out in space away from the humans as a way to say, you know what? We'll leave you guys alone if you guys leave us alone. Now, of course, there were many different storylines that took place on Avalon. The most important one was Fatal Attractions, where you have Magneto being able to rip off the adamantium off the bones of Wolverine. Now, with all that happening in the past, you also had Charles Xavier shut down his mind, Magneto's mind. And so for Magneto, he's just there. He's completely useless, but you have his acolytes watching over him. Now, his acolytes are really important in this storyline. The acolytes are different people who kind of praise Magneto as some kind of god for the mutant race. Now, his right-hand man kind of took over his position as the leader of the acolytes, and that would be Exodus. Now, by this point in our coverage over the X-Men, we don't know much about Exodus. And matter of fact, we do learn his name in this storyline right here, and that is really it. But with Exodus, he's now in charge of the acolytes. Now, as we kind of get into the opening pages of the storyline, we're also kind of picking up where X-Men Prime #1 had left off at, and let me explain. You see, back in X-Men Prime #1, we had saw the acolytes find this random person who was stuck in some kind of crystal. Now, technically, it's the M'Kraan crystal from the Age of Apocalypse reality. But apparently, when they found the crystal, they found somebody stuck inside of it. Now, for our heroes, they were able to break that person out and put that person in some kind of life support machine as a way to keep that person alive long enough for that person to awake. But here's the thing, because you now have different members of the acolytes kind of getting worried about the idea of bringing this random person on their spaceship. Now, we do learn here that this person is a mutant, a very powerful mutant. Now, at first, I thought maybe they had found X-Men, but then I remembered that X-Men had already crashed on Earth when the acolytes had found this crystal, or this person who's stuck in the crystal. So we're kind of left to wonder, who is this person? Now, you do have Milan and Colossus kind of share their concerns about the idea of bringing this person on a spaceship. But for Exodus, he kind of looks at this as some kind of sign for greatness to come for the acolytes. So he said, Milan, you're going to stay in here and watch over our patient. But also, I kind of hate the idea that you don't believe in me or what we actually stand for. And so you have everyone leave, and this is where things go south. Because right after you have everybody leave, you have Milan connect himself into the computer, the life support computer that's keeping their patient alive. Now, for Milan, he has the ability to communicate with machines. And here comes the big problem, though, because he begins to see all these different images of another reality. And of course, it would be the Age of Apocalypse reality, where he sees Magneto and Exodus on the X-Men team in that reality. And so he's very confused, but he realized that all of these different images are coming from their patient. Now, you didn't have their patient begin to turn Milan into life energy and begin to absorb him. And just like that, he is officially gone and dead, thanks to their patient. But now we have to check in with the X-Men. Now, for the X-Men, we're kind of using them as a way to kind of figure out what's going on currently with the X-Men. Two big things are currently happening. The first is that when it came to Archangel, he was called up by his ex-girlfriend, Detective Jones, where he had learned that there was some kind of massacre. A bunch of humans were just killed off by a group of mutants. And the thing is, we have no idea who these mutants are. But you have Storm informed Charles that some random group of mutants are now claiming that they were the ones who had massacred all those humans in that building that Archangel found in that issue. But also, we have to remember that some kind of character, Onslaught, had punched Juggernaut across the country over into New Jersey. And so now for the X-Men, they have another patient who's in a coma. Gambit, Sabretooth, and also Juggernaut. And technically, there is a third thing we do get reminded here, and that's the idea of Gambit. Because when it came to Legion Quest, at the very end of that storyline for our heroes, they had believed that the entire world was going to end. And so you had Rogue kiss Gambit as a way to say goodbye to one another. Now, thanks to Bishop, the world did not end, but Rogue and also Gambit, they still kiss. And so it put Gambit in a coma, and it allowed Rogue to look into his mind, where of course she saw all these different dark secrets. And so now we're seeing Rogue in Florida going over to some building and trying to break into that building. But then she's stopped by Iceman. But we kind of see here that by looking in her eyes, she does right now have the powers of Gambit. But we're kind of left to wonder what is so important about that helmet that she was trying to steal. Now, as we transition back over to Avalon, we pick up with Skid and also Fire Fist. Now, these are two characters who had been around for a very long time in Marvel Comics. I mean, like, they were in the early days of X Factor comics. They were trainees for X Factor, but by the 1990s, unfortunately, they were kind of put on the back burner. You know, there was a point where their minds were being controlled by Strife. They had joined the Mutant Liberation Front, but he didn't have Magneto being able to free their minds, and they had joined his side. The problem is now they're kind of regretting joining his side and being acolytes, because by this point, again, Magneto, his mind has been shut down. But on top of that, Exodus is in charge. And the way you have him kind of running things for Skid and Fire Fist, they're not liking the idea of being up on Avalon. They're kind of wondering of the possibility of going down to Earth with the X-Men. Now, you do have Fire Fist get called up because they want somebody to go check in on the patient. Milan had disappeared. They have no idea that technically Milan is dead. And so you have Fire Fist go check in on the patient. And just like that, as soon as you have Rusty walk into the room, he begins to get closer to the patient. And just like Milan earlier, his body begins to turn into life energy. He's being absorbed by the patient. Now, another acolyte sees what's happening, and that would be Scanner. And we come to find out that this person is Holocaust, the son of Apocalypse from the Age of Apocalypse reality. Now, for Holocaust, he's very confused here because once you have Exodus walk into the room, he's kind of like, hey, I know who you are. You're Exodus. Like, you're part of the X-Men. But in this reality, for Exodus, he never joined the X-Men. As a matter of fact, the X-Men are sworn enemies of the Acolytes. So for Exodus, he's kind of like, who in the world is this guy right now claiming that I'm some kind of X-Men, but also so was Magneto, and we fought against you and apparently your father? Now also you have Holocaust looking for Dark Beast, because in that reality, Dark Beast was also working for Apocalypse as well. And so this leads into the two of them fighting against one another, but now they're tearing apart Avalon left and right. And for Colossus, he wakes up and realizes what's happening. Really, all the acolytes wake up and realize what's happening at the moment. But for Colossus, he realized, okay, I gotta find Magneto. His mind is completely shut down. Somebody has to protect him while everything is just popping off on Avalon, while you have Exodus fighting against Holocaust. And their battle is epic. But then out of nowhere, we jump over to Cyclops and Jean Grey. Now, these two characters, they're on their way home. But thing is, as they pull up to their school, they see Amelia Voigt. Now, for Amelia Voigt, she is an old lover of Charles Xavier. But here comes the big catch. You see, she's also part of the Acolytes, but also she has the ability to teleport. Now, technically, she can turn herself and other people into mist as a way to move around. But she also has the ability to kind of use the astral plane as a way to travel long distance. And so right now it's her using that method to travel from Avalon back down to Earth to the school of Charles Xavier. The problem is that while she's doing that, she kind of left open a portal, allowing Cyclops and Jean Grey to teleport from Earth up to Avalon that's currently falling apart as she stays down on Earth. And so as we get into X-Men issue number 43, we see Charles Xavier just trying his best to contact his missing X-Men. He has no idea where they're at. And the thing is, They're on Avalon, but there is a special reason why Charles Xavier is unable to connect his mind to Cyclops and Jean Grey, who are currently on Avalon. Now, for Cyclops and Jean Grey, they're very confused on what in the world is going on here. But for the Acolytes, they truly believe that technically Cyclops and Jean Grey must be working with Holocaust as a way to bring down Avalon, not knowing that technically Cyclops and Jean Grey being here is a complete accident. But either way, you do have our two X-Men fight against other members of the Acolytes, but you also have Jean Grey connect her mind to Holocaust to kind of understand what in the world is going on here. Now, she does learn that Holocaust is his name, but also he has the ability to absorb people as life energy. But she also realized that the only reason why this man right now is on a rampage is because he heard the name Magneto. Now, that makes a lot of sense because at the end of Age of Apocalypse, it was Magneto who had killed off his father, Apocalypse. And so this is Holocaust saying, no, I need to go ahead and kill off Magneto for everything he did to me and my father. Now, you also have Jean Grey find out through Holocaust that he had killed off Rusty Collins, better known as Fire Fist. And for Cyclops, Rusty, one of his trainees. And so for Cyclops, he gets so ticked off at the Acolytes because he blamed the Acolytes for kind of forcing Rusty and also Skid to join the Acolytes. And now look what they did. They got him killed to Cyclops' mind. And so for Cyclops, he begins to fight against the Acolytes. Now for Jean Grey, she also tries to go in the mind of Exodus. The problem is that she can't. And it kind of shows that he's on a completely different power level than Charles Xavier and Jean Grey. Now, for Holocaust, he does see Cyclops. He's kind of like, oh, wait, you're Cyclops and you're Jean Grey. But in the old reality, Cyclops was working for Apocalypse, but then at the very last second, he joined the side of good. And when it came to Jean Grey, it was kind of her helping Cyclops stay on the side of good and helping him help other people who were being hurt by Apocalypse. And so for Holocaust, Cyclops is a traitor. But again, not knowing that technically he's in a different reality. But really, by this point, he's beginning to realize that there is a possibility that he's not technically in his reality. Now, for Colossus, he's with Magneto, but he's also nearby an escape pod. But he also saw that Cyclops and Jean Grey are technically there on Avalon. So he's kind of like, I can't leave them behind. What should I do? Because one, I gotta protect Magneto, but two, Cyclops and Jean Grey are nowhere near me at the moment. Now, back on Earth, you have Bishop kind of keeping everybody out of Charles Xavier's room, including Amelia Voigt. But for Amelia, she's kind of like, Bishop, you can't stop me because, like, I can teleport. And so just like that, she teleports into his room to talk to Charles Xavier. Now, for Charles, he does tell Bishop, like, hey, it is okay for her to be here, but also he wants to know why he's unable to pick up Cyclops and Jean Grey. And the reason why, because back on Avalon, when it came to Exodus, he made sure that there's no way that outside people can kind of look into Avalon, meaning that psychics as well cannot use their abilities to connect their minds to somebody who's on Avalon. And so that includes right now Cyclops and Jean Grey. But right now, Avalon is just falling apart. But back on Avalon, you have Cyclops being able to convince the Acolytes to work with him, not against him, because he said, hey, listen, I know that you guys feel like that we are your number one enemies because you believe Magneto taught you that. But here's the thing. Did Magneto actually teach you guys that? Or was it other people who worked under Magneto, like Exodus, or possibly, Fabian Cortez? And the thing is him saying like, Avalon is falling apart. We should be working together, not fighting against one another. And so just like that, the Acolytes, Cyclops, and Jean Grey are going to work together to survive, but also get back down to Earth safely. Now, this could be another hint at the idea of Onslaught on his way, and let me explain, because you have Charles finally supposedly being able to connect his mind to Jean Grey, but apparently he's using a lot of energy. And so you have Jean Grey being able to catch him up. But at the same time, he's also able to connect to Colossus. But here comes the thing. Jean Grey tells Charles Xavier her game plan, the possibility of surviving, but also working her way over to Colossus to use the same escape pod that he has as a way to survive. But you have Charles tell Colossus a completely different story, saying, hey, listen, Jean Grey and Cyclops, they found their own way back down to Earth. So Colossus, go ahead and use that escape pod to get away from Avalon. And so you have Colossus listen to Charles Xavier, grab Magneto, get into the escape pod, and just leave. But the problem is that Jean Grey sees Colossus leaving. She's kind of like, why did Colossus just leave us behind? What in the world is going on here? Now, the rest of this chapter is really more of Jean Grey and Cyclops working separately from one another to get back down to Earth. And let me explain. You see, for Jean Grey, she's going to go ahead and leave Scott behind to go find Skid, because Skid is on a different part of Avalon that had already broke apart from the rest of Avalon. And so once you have Jean Grey being able to find Skid, they use their powers together as they re-enter the Earth without trying to be burned up. Now for Cyclops and his group, the Acolytes, they head over to the escape pods to find out the last one, technically the only one, has already been used by Colossus and also Magneto. And so you have Scott say, okay, listen, we got some powers here that could basically help us survive as we re-enter the Earth. And so the last few pages, all you see is our heroes with the Acolytes just crashing into the Earth, leaving us wondering, will they survive the actual crash? Now, as we get into the final chapter of this storyline, we're picking up with Colossus. Now, Colossus had apparently made it back to Earth okay, but where's Magneto? Now, you see Colossus been found by somebody else, and apparently this person knows Colossus very well. Now, she does not tell Colossus who she is, and so he wakes up, he's kind of like, where's Magneto? Who are you? And he tries to attack her. Now, she's able to use her weapon as a way to knock him out very easily. But after doing that, she's kind of like, hey, you know what? Let's go over there and we'll try this again very soon. But getting back over to school of Charles Xavier is really more of Charles right now just trying to use his abilities to find Jean Grey and Cyclops. And the problem is right now, unfortunately, he cannot find them at all. Now, Amelia Voigt is there as well. And it's really her kind of realizing that Charles has not changed ever since they had broken up years ago, but also kind of seeing him being more like a father figure. Like he's actually worried about his children. And so you do have Charles continue to try to use his abilities, but other methods as well to hopefully find Jean Grey and Cyclops. Now, luckily for Charles, Bishop does find Jean Grey and also Skid. So there you go right there. But the question is right now, where is Cyclops? Did he survive with the rest of the Acolytes? Now, we do see that Cyclops is alive and hanging out with the rest of the Acolytes, but somewhere in the middle of a desert. Now, here's the thing, because when it came to Holocaust, he did kill off 3 members of the Acolytes. You had Fire Fist, Milan. The third one I forgot, but technically is not important at all. But for Cyclops right now, it's him right now trying to use his skills as a survivor to kind of lead the Acolytes somewhere safe and sound. And so it's them right now just trying their best to follow Cyclops as their leader, but to hopefully get somewhere safe and sound. Now for Colossus, we see him being dragged right now by our mysterious character over to a certain location. Now we have no idea where they're going, but technically we do learn here that this could be an old base of Magneto. And the reason why, because when it came to Magneto's escape pod, it had crashed here for a purpose, meaning that this base must belong to Magneto. But either way, you do have our mysterious character take Colossus over to the supposed building. Now, I kind of like the idea of this story exploring the powers of Amelia Voigt. And here's the reason why. Because for this story, we do learn that once Amelia Voigt powers were activated, her mutant ability, she kind of lost her physical form, meaning that her actual form is her mist form. And so it takes a lot of concentration to kind of focus her powers to make sure that she stays in her physical form, not in her mist form. And so what Charles wants to do is kind of expand on his mutant ability. And he kind of feels like he can't do that in his physical form. And so what he wants to do is have Amelia Voigt use her ability to turn him and her into mist to kind of help expand his powers a tad bit more to hopefully find Cyclops. Now, technically, this does not work at all, but you do have Cyclops being able to contact Charles Xavier. Because when it came to Cyclops and the Acolytes, they had landed near the Outback base that the X-Men had used back in the Chris Claremont days. Now, the Outback base wasn't, of course, in Australia, but the base has supposedly been deactivated for a good while, or we're supposed to believe that, because you have Cyclops realize that somebody had been there recently and also used computers there as well. So we're kind of left to wonder who that could possibly be. Now, with all that being said, once you have Cyclops being able to contact Charles Xavier, you have Amelia Voigt kind of express that she's very angry with Charles. And the reason why, because Charles kind of pushed himself to his limits when it came to finding Cyclops and Jean Grey, almost killing himself. But it's Charles saying, no, you don't understand, Amelia. Like, I would do anything for my dream, anything for my X-Men, anything for my students. And so it's him saying, like, you don't understand what it's kind of like to care for other people. Now, for Amelia, it's her also expressing that she truly believes that Magneto and Charles Xavier, their dreams are technically pointless. There's no way either one of them is going to be able to achieve their dreams at all. And so this kind of leads into the ending of the storyline where you have Colossus finally wake up. And when he does, oh my God, when he wakes up, he realized that it's Callisto who had saved him. Now, Callisto was part of the Morlocks, but here's the catch. She looks a whole lot older than the last time we saw her. And so it's her saying, hey, listen, I need your help. Yes, I do look older, but also I need your help to save the world. Okay, so with X-Force issue number 44, I'm kind of hyped to see where this book could honestly go. And here's the reason why, because issue number 44 is really more of a relaunch. It's kind of like, hey, you know what? We just did all these different X-Force stories, all these different X events, and after Age of Apocalypse and working our way up to Onslaught, it's time for a shuffling for the X-Force team, where you're going to have some members leave, but you're also going to have some people join X-Force as well. And so honestly, for me, I like this book because it's a brand new beginning. It's kind of like, hey, you know what? Start here if you want to get an X-Force in the 1990s. Now, of course, by this point in the real world, we already had like hundreds and hundreds of X-Force books. But back then, this could have been a great like starting off point if you were trying to get an X-Force comics. And you see what I mean as we go through today's storyline. Because as we get into the opening pages of this storyline, we're kind of picking up where X-Men Prime number 1 had left off at. You see, with X-Men Prime number 1, you had that book be used as a way to set up all the different X books post Age of Apocalypse, including X-Force as well. And so when it came to X-Force, their base got blown up. But as soon as that happened, you had Cyclops appear. And the reason why, because you had Charles tell Cyclops, hey, go find Cable and bring him back over here, which he did. And so right now for X-Force, they're staying with the X-Men at their base. Now, as soon as they arrived, you had Cable and Charles Xavier go have a private meeting. And so you have all the different members of X-Force kind of wondering like, what is that meeting possibly about? And the thing is, they actually believe that possibly Cable might disband the team, or he might kick off a few members, but only keep the rest. Their minds are racing in all different types of directions. Now, like I said, this book is also setting up things for future X-Force books as well, because you have Warpath ask everybody, hey, has anybody seen Siren? Everybody says no. She just straight up missing. And the thing is, everyone's not truly worried because she is a grown woman. The thing is, they should be worried. But after all of that, you have our heroes go outside and have their own private meeting. Now, with this private meeting, I'm going to use this as a way to bring up something very important when it came to prior X-Force comics that took place before Age of Apocalypse, and now be the idea of Sunspot. You see, prior to Age of Apocalypse, really prior to Legion Quest, we had met a character known as Rainfire. Now, when it came to Rainfire, he just appeared out of nowhere and took over the Mutant Liberation Front, a terrorist group. But after a while, we had learned that Rainfire was Sunspot. This is where things get a tad bit confusing, because there are moments in the past where we saw both characters at the same exact time. But either way, before we got into Legion Quest in Age of Apocalypse, we had learned that somehow Rainfire was Sunspot. But then out of nowhere, after those events, we come to find out that Cable was somehow able to help Sunspot to get rid of his Rainfire persona, but also his powers have been upgraded as well, meaning that Sunspot can actually fly. But the whole idea of Sunspot being Rainfire kind of brings some bad blood between his old teammates on X-Force. They no longer trust him. Now, Sam does because they're best friends, but for the rest of the team, they're kind of like, you were Rainfire, and then somehow Cable was able to help you, and we have no idea how. What in the world actually went down? But either way, you didn't have Warpath call up Banshee. And the reason why, because Banshee is the father to Siren. And so for Warpath, it's kind of like, hey, have you seen your daughter? And Banshee says no. Now, I kind of like this because it really shows that Warpath does care a lot for Siren. He wants to make sure that she is okay. The rest of the team is kind of like, she's a grown woman. She'll be okay. But for Warpath and also Banshee, they're kind of like, nah. Where in the world could Siren be at? And so you have Warpath promise to continue to look for her. And so with X-Force now staying with the X-Men, you have Boom Boom and also Shatterstar go try to use the Danger Room as a way to get a workout done. But here's the thing, because while you have Shatterstar trying to start up the program, he realized there's somebody already in there and they got a program running at the moment. Now you think like, okay, cool. It has to be one of the X-Men like Cyclops, Jean Grey. Nope. Not even X-Force either. It is actually Sabretooth. Because remember, around this time in Marvel Comics, Charles believed that he could save the mind of Sabretooth, turn him into a better person. But right now, we're seeing Sabretooth kind of just relaxing in the Danger Room, kind of like getting his tan on, I guess. It's pretty wild to me. Now, I kind of want to switch over to Sam Guthrie. Here's the reason why. Because for Sam Guthrie, he truly believes in the possibility that Cable is going to remove him off the X-Force team. And the thing is, you have Sam right now just walking around the school, being depressed, being all sad and everything. But then he runs into Cyclops. Now, I kind of like this a lot because it's Cyclops being that mentor for Cannonball, because when Cyclops had joined the X-Men, he was younger than Cannonball was. But then over time, he realized that he had a family. And you had Cyclops say like, hey, listen, when I first joined, I was very insecure about myself when it came to the rest of the X-members. Then I realized I can be myself because we are a family. And so for Cannonball, it's him kind of realizing that, hey, you may feel somewhat insecure at the moment, but don't worry, because the rest of the X teams are X members. We're here for you because we are an X family. Now, for a brief moment, we do jump back to Boom Boom and also Shatterstar. And the thing is, you have Sabretooth realize that he's currently being watched. And so you have Sabretooth jump on the windows of the control room, and it does freak out Shatterstar and also Boom Boom. Now Cannonball, he does walk into the room and he begins to lecture them, kind of like, y'all have no idea how dangerous Sabretooth is. Now for Boom Boom and Shatterstar, they definitely know how dangerous he is, but it's Boom Boom realizing that there's something different about Sabretooth. And let's not forget, when it came to prior Age of Apocalypse, you had Wolverine stab Sabretooth in the head. And so we're kind of left to believe that possibly it has done something to his mind. Now, for Cable and Charles Xavier, their meeting does finally end. So you do have Cable call back everyone to the office of Charles Xavier. Now, we kind of find out that what they were talking about is kind of like a refresh for X-Force. Like, first off, they're going to stay with the X-Men, but also try to work alongside with the X-Men in a better way, better connected to one another. But also, every single member on the team getting brand new outfits. But for Cable, he'll try his best to make sure that the entire team's able to now communicate with their minds, basically setting up a side link with all their minds together. And so, like I said, this is a fresh start for X-Force. Now, while you have everybody getting their brand new outfits, well, you have Cannonball realize he doesn't have one. And it's kind of like, wait a second. We are talking about the idea of Cannonball no longer being on X-Force, or possibly being removed from all the different X teams. And we kind of find out, no. What's happening is for Cannonball, yes, he is getting kicked off the X-Force team, but it's really more because he graduated. He's now heading over to the X-Men team. But on top of that, with him being off that team, somebody has to replace him. And that would be Caliban. Caliban is now going to join X-Force. But we're technically not done just yet, because there's Richter. And for Richter, he never really did like Cable at all, because for a while there, he believed that Cable was the one who had killed off his father. But in reality, it was Strife, the clone of Cable. Now, we were kind of left to believe in the possibility that Richter had moved on from the idea of believing that Cable killed off his father, but you now have Richter kind of being upset about the idea of Cable being in their minds, especially his. And so you have Richter saying, hey, you know what? I'm out. I'm going away. I'll see y'all later. And so there goes Richter. He's now off the team officially. But either way, we now have our new X-Force team. Now, let's not forget, Cannonball and Boom Boom, they were dating one another. But it's them saying, like, no matter what, even if we're on two different teams, we're going to try our best to keep that love strong and powerful. You know, we'll make sure it is not end. Now, we already know, because in future comics, it does end. But for right now, it's kind of like, no. They might have the chance to keep their relationship strong if they're able to work together, even though they're on two different X teams at the moment. But yeah, we now have a brand new X-Force team. You now have Cable, you got Domino, Warpath, Sunspot, Boom Boom, Shatterstar, and also Caliban as well. This is your brand new X-Force team of the 1990s. But we're not done just yet, because like I said earlier, Siren is missing, and everyone else except for Warpath was kind of like, hey, you know what? She's a grown woman. Most likely she is okay. No, she is not. She was technically kidnapped and brought over to the Wiseman Institute for the criminally insane. And so right now, they're trying to say is that Siren is insane at the moment, and we have no idea how in the world they were able to grab her. But this Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get back into our coverage over the X-Men, but now we're going to jump over to Uncanny X-Men with issue number 323 and 324. Now, with this two-part story arc, we're kind of getting into a brand new storyline. And let me explain, because in the mid-1990s, right after Age of Apocalypse, we had another storyline being put together by using different X titles at that time. A storyline called Gene Nation, or that's what I called it. But Gene Nation kind of brought in a brand new group of people to kind of go after humans, but also after the X-Men as well. Now, technically, the only reason why they're going after the X-Men because the X-Men are standing in their way when it comes to their end goal, which is killing off the human race. And you see what I mean as we go through today's storyline. But here's the thing, because this is also kind of building off an earlier concept, the whole idea of the Morlocks and possibly Dark Beasts as well. Now, as we get into the opening pages of this storyline, we're really picking up with Rogue and Iceman. Now, for Rogue, we have to remember that technically she's on the road right now with Iceman because she's running away from her problems. And let me explain, because when it came to Legion Quest, at the end of that storyline, you had our heroes believe the world was going to end. And so for Gambit and Rogue, they say, you know what, let's go ahead and kiss, because no matter what, the world is going to die. The universe is going to die. But when it came to Bishop, he was able to go back in time to stop Legion from basically changing the timeline. And so it allowed Rogue and everyone else to live. The problem is that Rogue and Gambit still kiss. And with them kissing, her powers put Gambit in a coma. But also it allowed her to look into his mind. And so when she did, she saw some things that scared her and made her run away. Now, for Bobby Drake, he went with her to hopefully, watch over her, but to also figure out what's going on with her. What does she see in the mind of Gambit? Now, back at the school of Charles Xavier, we see that Archangel and Psylocke kind of going through a Danger Room session. Now, by this point in Marvel Comics, these two characters had just begun to date one another. And so they're still kind of like in the early stages of their relationship. Now, for Psylocke, she kind of realized there's something wrong with Archangel. And technically, she's right, because in an earlier storyline, Archangel was called by his ex-girlfriend to a crime scene where there were a bunch of dead humans, and apparently some mutants had killed those humans for an unknown reason. And so for Archangel, it's kind of like he can't get that image out of his head, the piles of dead bodies that was found in that building. But while you have the two characters talking to one another, you didn't have Gambit appear. Now, when Gambit does appear, this is him finally coming out of his coma, but also he's looking for Rogue. The problem is he's still too tired from what happened to him, and so he does pass out. And you have Psylocke kind of wondering like, what's going on with Gambit? Because at first, when he walked into the room, her power said, hey, danger is coming. Now, technically, that should not be happening because Gambit is an X-Men, but for some strange reason, her power said no. There was trouble coming, and it was Gambit. Now, we also have to remember what happened over in X-Force comics, because by this point in the timeline of X-Men, you had Cannonball leave the X-Force team and join the X-Men team. So when his issue came out, we're seeing him on his first assignment. And his first assignment is to watch over Sabretooth. Now, this is a callback to an earlier storyline we did on our channel. When it came to Sabretooth around this time in Marvel Comics, you had Charles believe that he can actually fix the mind of Sabretooth, turn him into a better person, a good guy. Now, here's the thing, because prior to Legion Quest, you had most of the X-Men out there trying their best to find a way to stop Legion as a way to save the entire universe. But you had Logan just come back home to the school of Charles Xavier, allowing him to watch over Sabretooth. The problem is that it led into a fight between the two characters. And with that fight, well, you had Wolverine stab Sabretooth right in the head. And so we're kind of left to believe it did something to the mind of Sabretooth, because right now he's acting like a house pet, just running around the school, barking, growling. He's really acting like he's some kind of house pet. Now, you have Cannonball watching over him, and you have Sabretooth drag Cannonball all the way outside right in front of Logan. Now, when it comes to Logan, this is also a callback to Fatal Attractions. You see, in that storyline, you have Magneto go out of his way to rip off the adamantium off the bones of Wolverine. Now, in our last Wolverine video, we had discussed that apparently when it comes to Wolverine's mutation, he was supposed to slowly turn into a wild animal with his mind. The problem was for Wolverine, Weapon X had kidnapped him and added the adamantium to his bones. When that happened, it stopped that process of him turning into a wild animal. But again, thanks to Magneto, the adamantium is no longer around. And so his mutation is going back to its original route, slowly turning him into a wild animal, a savage. Now, you do have Storm kind of stop Wolverine from bugging Cannonball and also Sabretooth. But it's also Storm saying, hey, listen, I'm going to town with Cannonball and I want you, Logan, to come with me. Now, at first, he says no, because the whole idea that he might turn to a savage and possibly attack her or somebody else. But it's Storm saying, I trust you because you and I have been friends for a very long time. Now, as you all know, when it comes to the X-Men, they always have some kind of love issues going on. Like, for example, Beast, because we see Beast going over to see Trish Tilby. Now, Trish Tilby is a reporter, but also the on and off again girlfriend to Beast. Now, when it comes to Trish, she is a reporter. She told the entire world about the legacy virus. As we all know, the virus is supposedly from the future, came back in time, and began to kill off mutants left and right. Now, at first, it was just mutants, but now it had evolved and going after the human race as well. Now, technically, there's only one human right now who has the virus. That would be Moira Taggart. That's really it. But the thing is, for the X-Men, the American government, really other governments as well, they were trying their best to keep this hush-hush until they were able to find a way to get rid of the virus. But thanks to Trish Tilby, the entire world now knows about it. And the thing is, she put targets on the back of all these different mutants out there. So now you have all these different mutants who could possibly be attacked because you're going to have humans believe that they're carrying the legacy virus, even though they might not be carrying the virus at all. And so it's Beast blaming her, but she also blames Beast because she says, if you guys, the X-Men, Excalibur, all different X-teams, have done their job, this virus would have been handled. The people who had died because of me would have not died. Let's not forget, in X-Men Prime #1, there was a young boy named Dennis who was trying his best to get over to Charles Xavier's school, but unfortunately, he was beaten to death because you had humans believe that he was a mutant carrying the legacy virus, which he was a mutant, but not carrying the virus. Either way, he died. And so it's Beast saying, that's on you. But she said, no, that's on you. Because if you have done your job, found a way to handle the virus, that boy will still be alive. And so you have Beast walk away angry. But Beast is right because we see Graydon Creed, this guy who is the son to Sabretooth and also Mystique, hate on the mutant race so much, using this as a way to push his agenda, the whole idea of going after the mutants. And so you have different folks right now being scared of what he is saying, because what he's saying right now is feeding off all the hatred that he can feel right now coming from different humans who are upset with the possibility of getting the legacy virus because of the mutants. Now, for Storm, Wolverine, and Cannonball, as they go in town, they do meet up with Detective Jones. Now, when it comes to Jones, she is the ex-girlfriend to Archangel, but she was the one who told Archangel about the piles of dead bodies of random humans who were supposedly killed off by a mutant group. And so it's them right now trying to get more information out of her to hopefully get an idea what is going down right now when it comes to mutants and humans possibly fighting against one another. We have to check in on Rogue and Iceman, and here's the reason why. Because you have the two of them still on their road trip. They got a flat tire. So, with their flat tire, you have Rogue saying, hey, listen, we're not going to use our powers. We're going to go ahead and try to walk over to a nearby town. Now, they took a small break, but it's also Bobby trying again to get into the mind of Rogue to figure out what does she see in the mind of Gambit. Unfortunately, once again, you have Rogue not tell us, nor him. Now, as she walks away, you have Bobby begin to see Emma Frost. Now, this is a callback to an earlier storyline where you had Emma Frost's mind in the body of Bobby. And so for Bobby right now, he's kind of wondering like, hey, is this Emma right now playing mind games with me, or possibly a side effect because she was in my body technically? But either way, she disappears. And you have Rogue and Iceman continue on with their road trip. Getting back over to Wolverine, Storm, and also Cannonball, they're still with Detective Jones, but they're now meeting up with Dr. Chen at the morgue, and they're trying to figure out what exactly happened to all those humans who had supposedly died in that building that Archangel was at. But you have Dr. Chen say, I can't tell you anything because there's no signs on their body that tells me what exactly happened to them. It's kind of like they just died out of nowhere, and that's really it. And so for Storm, that makes no sense. But you didn't have Logan realize there's something up with Dr. Chen. And we kind of find out this is not Dr. Chen. This is a brand new character known as Sack. Now, for Sack, he has the ability to take over your body, kind of use your body however he wants to. But you are dead once he does take over your body. But he did not come here alone. Matter of fact, he came here with another character, and that would be Vessel. Now, for Vessel, we're going to learn more about him the next chapter of this video, but you do have Vessel tell us in our heroes that him and Sack are part of a new group called the Gene Nation, and their main goal is to kill off the human race. Now we do start with the next chapter, Uncanny X-Men issue number 324. Now we start off with Psylocke, and you have Psylocke currently in the mind of Gambit because she wants to know why earlier her powers told her like, hey, you are near danger at the moment. But that danger was Gambit, somebody who's an X-Men, somebody who's on her side, her team. And so while you have Gambit resting, you have Psylocke try to go into her mind, or sorry, his mind, to figure out what's going on with Gambit. Now, you also have Psylocke tell us that when it comes to other psychics, Charles Xavier, Jean Grey, they have a hard time reading the mind of Gambit. Now, at first, she kind of feels like she's doing a good job hiding in his mind to hopefully figure out some dark secrets about him, but you have Gambit being able to find her in his mind and then being able to push her out. Now, once he does wake up, you have Psylocke try her best to play it off. But the problem is Gambit knows what she was trying to do. And so for right now, he tells her, I do not want you ever in my head ever again. And so you have Psylocke walking away, but at the same time, she still feels like there's something going on with Gambit. The question is right now, what? Now, I want to switch back over to Storm, Wolverine, and Cannonball because you do have our three heroes fighting against Vessel and Sack, but I kind of want to focus more on Vessel here because you do have Cannonball grab Sack and they leave to have a one-on-one battle. But for Vessel, we learned that what he did was he had technically absorbed the minds of all the different people who had died in that building. So technically, they're still alive, but their minds, their souls are trapped inside Vessel. We also learn here that apparently they have some kind of connection to the Morlocks, except he says we are better than our forefathers, the Morlocks. And so we're kind of left to believe that maybe they're like a better generation of Morlocks that had been hidden. Now for Storm, she wants to know more about his connection to the Morlocks. But for Logan, nah, it's time to fight. It's time to battle. And so you have our two heroes, Storm and Logan, and also I guess Detective Jones trying to work together to fight against Vessel. We also get another glimpse of Rogue and Iceman and their road trip. We get an update. Like, yeah, they found a mechanic. He'll take care of the car. And you have the two characters head over to a near bar. The problem is that you still have Iceman trying to get some kind of information out of Rogue, but he is unable to. But then you have the waitress walk up. But you have Iceman see Emma Frost once again. And so you have this waitress who's most likely not Emma Frost, but for Iceman mind in his eyes, it looks like it's Emma Frost right now trying to take his order. Now, there is a moment where we should be concerned because you do have Cannonball trying to handle Sack, but you have Sack kind of being like this slimy character begin to merge on Cannonball. So it's Sack saying, as soon as I'm done merging with you, you're going to die and I'll take over your body. And so for Cannonball, it's really more of, man, this is his first mission. And now we are talking about the possibility of him dying because of Sack trying to take over his body. Now, for Storm and Wolverine, they're still trying their best to take on Vessel. Now, luckily for them, Beast was nearby. And so you have Beast being able to join in on the battle. Now, for Vessel, is him trying to make a statement here by saying like, hey, listen, I represent the mutants who have become victims because of humans. The mutants who have been oppressed. It's him saying like what he's doing right now is not completely wrong. It's time for mutants to step up. Now, he also says that every time one mutant dies by the hands of a human, we'll go out of our way to kill off 100 humans as a way to pay back for the death of the mutant. Now, you also have Logan realize if they can find a way to bring down Vessel, then most likely all those souls that he had absorbed in the earlier storylines should go back to the dead bodies of all those humans. And so you have our heroes trying to figure out how can they bring down Vessel. Now, for Cannonball, it's him saying, you know what? It's time for me to go ahead and find a way to handle Sack. And so you have Cannonball grab Sack and they begin to head straight into the ground. And here's the reason why, because with Cannonball going at a very fast pace, most likely him and also Sack are possibly going to die. But for Cannonball, he has this field of energy around him that should be able to protect him. And so he's kind of wondering if he survived, will Sack survive the crash as well? You didn't have the battle kind of wrap up very quickly here because you do have Storm being able to kind of hit Vessel hard enough to kind of make him release all the different souls that he had captured in the earlier storylines. And so now those souls are going back to all those people, kind of bringing down the whole idea of some massacre happening in the earlier storyline, because technically they never did die. Now, once you do have our heroes take care of Sack and Vessel, they have to leave. And the reason why, because the police are going to be there very soon. So we now can go ahead and switch over to Bobby and also Rogue to close on today's video. Because for Rogue and also Iceman, they're leaving that bar. But as you have Rogue leaving, she apologizes for Iceman because the whole idea of thinking the waitress was Emma Frost. But after doing that, you then have Rogue tell the waitress to say hi to Grey Crow. Now, Grey Crow was one of the members of the Marauders, but you have the lady say Grey Crow has not been here in like a few years. And so for Rogue, she's kind of like, that's weird. How in the world did I know the fact that he used to work here? But as the book closes, we see the waitress pull out old photo of her, Gambit, and also Grey Crow, kind of hinting at the idea that Gambit may know Grey Crow as well, but how? And this is where we're going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later. What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. I'm your boy Fresh, and I'm here to give you guys another comic book story that you may or may not like. It's up to you to decide. With that being said, we are going to continue our coverage over the X-Men, and we pick up with X-Men Annual 95. Now, this book is really important. Here's the reason why, because it allows us to see a different kind of person when it comes to the character better known as Mr. Sinister. You think you know him, but once you begin to dive into his past, you are then able to see a different type of person when it comes to that character. We also see him going up against another character known as Tyler Dayspring, or better known as Genesis, the son of Cable. Now, you do have two X-Men in the book, Jean Grey and Beast, but technically they're playing a minor role in the storyline. The main purpose of this book is to allow us to dive into the past of Mr. Sinister, to see a different side to that character. And really, by the first page, you can tell that this is going to be some kind of love story. And the reason why I'm saying that, because in the first page, we see an elderly woman whose last name is Livingstone. And apparently she's being taken care of by nurses at this hospital. Now, we don't know everything about her just yet, but then out of nowhere, something or someone grabs her. Now we do transition over to Beast, and really it's Beast right now just hanging out in a nearby cabin that he had purchased along with Bobby Drake. And it's really more of Beast trying to get away to be able to relax, but usually he brings Iceman with him and they would have double dates. Now when it comes to Bobby, he is currently with Rogue on some kind of long road trip across America. So unfortunately for Hank, he can't bring Bobby with him, but instead he brought Jean Grey. Now, it's not like Jean Grey and Beast have some kind of hidden love for one another. We have to remember that when it came to first class of X-Men, it was Iceman, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Angel, and also Beast. And so with those first five X-Men, they have a closer bond than almost anybody else in the X-Men. They were the first class. And so for Jean Grey and Beast, it's more of like brother and sister just hanging out, having a good time at the cabin. And for Hank, he needed this, because let's also not forget that his girlfriend Trish Tilby had just told the entire world about the legacy virus. And with her doing that, you now have a big war coming very soon between mutants and humans. Things have gone south between the two parties. Now, for Sinister, he finally does enter the book, and when he does, we kind of find out that every year he goes to this hospital to see Miss Livingstone. And so once again, it's another year, and it's time for him to go see her. The problem is that when they walk into the room, him and the nurse, they don't see her. When they turn around, they see her, but she's now being held hostage by another character known as Tyler Dayspring, better known as Genesis, the son of Cable. Now, by this point in Marvel's timeline, when it comes to Tyler, he's trying to replace Apocalypse. The X-Men have no idea that technically Apocalypse is around again. They still believe that he is gone. But for right now, for Tyler, he is trying his best to be the new Apocalypse. And matter of fact, we see Tyler bring in the Dark Riders. Now, the Dark Riders are one of the many groups that Apocalypse used in the past when it came to different things he was trying to do across the world. And so for the Dark Riders, they're also kind of like Apocalypse. They believe in survival of the fittest. The strong may live, the weak may die, the strong may lead, the weak must follow. And so when it comes to the Dark Riders, they look at Tyler as a strong person that they must follow. And so you have Tyler say, listen, I have her, and I'm going to use her as a way to break you, to finally get rid of you, because you were working for Apocalypse, and you betrayed him, and he should have killed you then, but he did not. But don't worry, I'll do what he cannot do. And so you didn't have the Dark Riders and also Tyler disappear with Livingstone. But now we get a flashback. And with this flashback, we kind of see Mr. Sinister in the 1930s, getting the idea that the dude has been around for a very long time. But also, in this small town that he was in, alongside Livingstone, he was well known across the entire town. People knew him for so many different reasons, but they didn't know the actual reason why he was in that town for. And of course, to play with genetics. But we see him right now throwing some kind of event together where you have all these different rich people being able to come together, drink, dance, party, all of that. Now, at first, he did invite somebody else to hopefully spend some time with, but she brought someone with her, and that would be Livingstone. She was brought into that party as a guest with someone else, and allows Sinister to meet her, to dance with her, and get the chance to possibly fall in love with her, or at least make her fall in love with him. We also learned that her name is Faye. Her first name is Faye. Anyways, you have the two characters being able to live together, build a bond with one another, until one night she woke up and she heard things being moved around in the middle of the night, but she realized that Sinister, Essex, is not next to her. And so she got up to look around and she found this secret passageway. Now her mind is telling her, you gotta dip out, get the heck out of there now. But instead, she continued to go deeper and deeper, where she found his lab, but also she saw his real face, the white-skinned face, and she begins to freak out because she has no idea what she had just stepped into. But now we transition back into the present day. And now there is a good reason why Jean Grey is in the story. Like I said, though, her and Beast, for me personally, are kind of being put on the back burner. They are important, but not as important as Sinister. Either way, as we go into the present day, it's Beast and Jean Grey still at the cabin. Jean Grey is going to bed. Beast want to stay up and read his book. But then he realized they have some company, and that would be the Dark Riders. When it came to Tyler, he sent the Dark Riders to go after Jean Grey, to bring her over to him. Now, you do have Beast trying his best to protect Jean Grey. And really, you have Jean Grey get involved in the battle. She is a very powerful character, but the problem is our heroes are easily outnumbered by the Dark Riders, so they grab Jean Grey and teleport away. But when it comes to Jean Grey, she left behind a breadcrumb for Beast to follow, a psychic breadcrumb. And so as long as he follows it, he should be able to find her. And for Jean Grey, you have the Dark Riders take her over to Sinister and also Tyler. Now, they're not working together, no, because the Tyler, he wants to break down Sinister from the inside out, piece by piece. And he thinks that Livingstone is the key to begin the process of him breaking down Sinister piece by piece. Now you have Jean Grey being able to break free. And for Jean Grey, she wants to leave. But she also wants to save the elderly lady's life, Livingstone, or Faye for you guys. But either way, you have Sinister say, no, do not do anything at all. Because I realize her mind is right now shocked. She's right now thinking of the past. She's stuck in the past. And this kind of leads us into another flashback to kind of get a better idea of what happened to Faye right after she discovered that Sinister was not the man she believed to be. So with this second flashback, we do discover that right after she had, discovered that Sinister was a different man she had no idea about, she kind of became a prisoner. And here's the reason why. Because of her genetics. Because she carried the X gene. But kind of like Cyclops and Jean Grey, their offspring be a really powerful mutant. And so for her, if she has a child, that child would be a very powerful mutant. And so for Sinister, he was kind of just using her, playing around with her genetics. She was locked away for who knows how long. It got to the point where he was able to break her mentally and physically. But then one night, he just let her go and she ran away. And so after she left, you had Sinister stay behind in his castle or his home, whatever. But the thing is, he kind of seems heartbroken because it did seem like he did love her, but unfortunately, he had to use her for his studies. Back in the present day, we see that Beast was able to follow the trail that Jean Grey had left behind. The problem is that as soon as he arrives, he's then confronted by these little minions of possibly Sinister or Tyler. Who knows? Either way, these small little minions are trying to keep Beast away from the other three characters at the moment. Now, before you have Beast being able to get inside, you have Tyler explain why he captured Jean Grey. He wants Jean Grey to use her powers to create a mind link between two people, Faye and also Mr. Sinister. Now, for Jean Grey, it's a no. Matter of fact, she believes she can grab Faye and get the heck out of there. But you have Sinister say no. The thing about Faye is that she's dying. She has cancer. She only has weeks to live. And so please, before she die, go ahead and do this mind leak. Now, Beast arrives, and for Beast, he kind of realized what's going on with Sinister. Now, for Sinister, he's trying to play this character like, hey, you know what? I don't truly care that much for her, but yes, I will play your game, Tyler. I will do a mind link. But for Beast, he realized no. For Sinister, he does care a lot for Faye. And so he tells Jean Grey, no, Jean, you need to do the link. Go ahead and do it. And so you have Jean Grey connect the minds of the two characters. And for me, this mind link is perfect because it allows her to say the one thing she wants to say to Sinister. You failed because you believe that with my ex gene, I would give this perfect child into the world and you'll then be able to take that child for your own experiments. But once I realized what you wanted from me, I made sure I never got married. I made sure I never had a child to make sure that you would fail. And so as I die in these final moments, I can tell you that. I can tell you that I was able to stop you. And so then she dies in the arm of Mr. Sinister. You're kind of like, dang. Because the thing is, he did care for her, but at the same time, he still needed her genetics. But at the same time, he now failed in both areas, in love, but also in science. And really, the book kind of ends on the note where you do have everybody go their separate ways. And when they do, you have Beast explain to Jean Grey what Tyler was trying to achieve. The whole idea that love is a weakness. And the thing for Beast is love is not a weakness. And for Sinister, he kind of showed like, yeah, it's not a weakness at all for him. Now, for Tyler, he still believes that he was able to kind of break a small piece of Sinister from the inside out, but he will continue to try to break away at Mr. Sinister. But at the same time, he has to now move on to his next project. And his next project is going to be Wolverine. And this is where we're going to end today's You know, there's one X team I always forget about, and that would be Generation X. I don't know why. Like, I truly remember Excalibur, X-Factor, X-Force, X-Men, even the Exiles, and they came years later when it came to Generation X. But for some strange reason, I forget about this team. Now, technically, we have to cover them because they're part of our X-Men coverage. And honestly, they're not a bad team. They're a pretty cool young team to follow. And so today's video, we're going to cover Generation X issue numbers 5, 6, and 7, a 3-part story arc where we're kind of seeing the young heroes getting involved in the whole idea of Gene Nation. We had briefly talked about Gene Nation before in our earlier X-Men videos. It's the whole idea that we have a new group out there that's trying to kill off humans, but as they're doing that, they're kind of giving mutants a bad name. But also, they have some kind of connection with Dark Beast and the Morlocks. So as we go through our X-Men coverage, we are slowly learning more and more about this Gene Nation. But now it's time for Generation X to get involved in their schemes. But something else I do want to mention is that when it came to Generation X, it only had 4 issues and then it had to stop. And the reason why, because Age of Apocalypse, all the different X books had to stop for a short period of time to allow that event to be told to us. And once that event was done, you then had all books being able to resume where they had left off at. And so now for Generation X, they now pick up with issue number 5. And the opening pages of this book, we see Chambers in the basement of the boys' dorm room. Now, for Chambers, it's really more of him just want to be left alone. In the boys' dorm room basement, he had put a TV down there, a couch down there, basically a sign saying do not disturb. Like, he wants to be left alone, because for Chambers at this point in time in Marvel Comics, he hasn't really been able to build bonds with other characters just yet. And so technically he's on his own. Now you do have Gateway arrive as well. Now for Gateway, he is a very powerful mutant with the ability to teleport almost anywhere. Now for Gateway, he also does not speak at all. And so the only way to talk to him is, well, having your mind connect to his mind. And luckily for Chambers, he can do that, because when it came to Chambers, when his powers had manifested, a huge amount of psychic energy just blew out of his body, and it blew off his chest and the lower part of his face. Now, with that being said, he's now unable to eat, drink, but also not sleep as well, because his body no longer needs those things. But for him to talk, he has to use his mind, like Jean Grey, Charles Xavier, Psylocke. And so for Chambers, he's then able to talk to Gateway by using his mind. But you have Gateway tell Chambers you need to check on Paige Guthrie, better known as Husk, because of the legacy virus. So at first, we're kind of left to believe here that possibly Paige might have the legacy virus. Now, as we transition over to New York City, we're kind of picking up with Jubilee. And you have Jubilee right now trying to buy an apple. And the reason why for Pennis, because for Pennis, ever since she had arrived at the school, no one has truthfully been able to talk to her except for Chambers. And that technically only lasts for like 1 or 2 issues. And that's really it. And so they're right now trying to find a way to have her open up to finally be able to communicate. And so for Jubilee, she believes this apple could possibly help. The problem is that you have Ben Grimm run by her. And the reason why, because you have a crowd of people wanting his autograph. And so that crowd of people, they run over Jubilee, but also smash the apple that she had just bought. But either way, we do see 4 students of the Generation X team on their way over to Emma Frost's office at her company's building. The problem is that out of nowhere, you have Monet to stop moving. And so for Skin, Sync, and Jubilee, they're unable to move her because with her powers, it makes her invulnerable. And so they have a hard time pushing her and kind of wondering what to do with her, because she's not talking, she's not moving. It's kind of strange. But then out of nowhere, you have this random guy appear. Now, apparently, this random guy knows Skin very well from his previous life. And he also tells us that him and a few other people back in LA, they believe that Skin had possibly died because he had just randomly disappeared. No one knew what exactly happened to him. Now, for Skin, he wants to have a one-on-one conversation with the guy. And the thing is Skin saying, listen, you cannot tell anybody that we both know that I'm still alive, because I don't want anybody to know that I'm still alive. But if you decide to tell anybody, just know I will use my powers on you, and you're going to hate that very much. And so we're kind of left to wonder, what was Skin up to in his previous life before he had joined the team? Now, back at the new school for Charles Xavier, you have Banshee, one of the 2 instructors of the school, trying his best to get Penance to open up to him. Because again, ever since she had arrived, unfortunately, nobody except for Chambers has been really able to communicate with her. And so right now, it's Banshee kind of wondering, maybe it's a language barrier. And so for Banshee, he has been trying to read different books on different languages to kind of see what language she she actually speaks. Now, he does stop for the day. He goes inside the kitchen, and when he does, he realized that she had followed him, but also she wants an apple. And for me personally, it kind of shows that piece by piece, by day, is her opening up to almost every single person at the school. But right now, starting off with Banshee for today. Now, getting back over to the students who are making their way over to Emma Frost's company building, we do learn here that they had left Monet behind in the middle of the city, just like that, to move on with their day. And also, you had Emma Frost basically send a driver to pick them up, and that driver did pick them up and delivered them over to the company's building. The problem is that as soon as they entered the garage, there was a loud boom sound. Now, for our young heroes, they get out of the vehicle to realize the front of the vehicle has been completely crushed. The driver is also dead. It gets even worse because also there were a bunch of bodyguards in that one particular part of the building. They're all dead, but also pinned to the wall. Now, for our young heroes, they realize something is going on here in the building, and Emma might need their help. But you didn't have Frost contact the young kids and say, do not come up here at all. Matter of fact, go get help. Call the X-Men now. But of course, for our young heroes, they're gonna do the exact opposite. Now, we do learn what's going on with Paige Guthrie, better known as Husk. It's the whole idea that no, she does not have the legacy virus. It's more of she's scared of the legacy virus. You see, thanks to Trish Tilby telling the entire world about the legacy virus, you now have everyone kind of freaking out, especially mutants, because they heard this virus kills off mutants just like that, left and right. It is also now going after humans as well. And so for Paige, it's really more of her, one, being drunk right now, but two, also kind of expressing that she does not see the purpose of life anymore, because now you are talking of the possibility of dying from a virus. So why in the world should she try to study? Why in the world should she be an X-Men? Like, what is the purpose of life? And so for Chamber, it's him right now kind of like, man, I don't want to get involved. But at the same time, he realized she needs somebody in her corner at the moment. Now, for the students who are trying their best to save their teacher, Emma Frost, while they're in the elevator going up, out of nowhere, they're then confronted by a character known as Hemingway. Now, for Hemingway, he's technically part of Gene Nation. Now, by this point in our coverage over the X-Men, we have no idea what Gene Nation truly is. All we know is that it's some kind of spin-off from the Morlocks. And they look at the Morlocks as their ancestors, but also they're being led by Dark Beast, a character from the Age of Apocalypse timeline. Now, with all that being said, for Gene Nation, they came here for one particular mutant, really two, Emma Frost and another character known as Leech. And we know Leech very well from the early days of X Factor. But either way, you do have our young heroes being able to use their powers on Hemingway to send him away for the time being. But right after doing that, you have our heroes turn around and realize there is a child in that room with them, and that would be Artie. Now, we have not seen Artie in a very long time. Like, I want to say at the tail end of New Mutants leading into X-Force. When it comes to Artie, he is a mutant that cannot communicate normally. Instead, he has to use psychic images as a way to talk to other people. And so right now is him trying to communicate to our young heroes. But apparently he saw some messed up things before coming here, but we have no idea what he's trying to tell our young heroes. Either way, they still have a mission, and that mission right now is to save Emma Frost. Now, as we jump into issue number 6, we're kind of getting into some more information about Gene Nation, because when it comes to Hemingway, he's with Marrow, the actual leader of the nation, who's right now having Emma Frost as their prisoner. Now, things get a tad bit crazier because you have Meryl say that her and her crew, they came from a different dimension. But let's not forget that technically they are a spinoff of the Morlocks. Now, the reason why they are here in New York is not just for Emma Frost. It's also because of Leech. Now, Leech was a Morlock. He was there on the day most of the Morlocks were massacred thanks to the Mutant Massacre storyline where you had the Marauders go down there to kill off a huge chunk of the mutants in there. And so Leech was able to get away, but he hid. Now for Leech, here's the thing about him. He has the ability to cancel out other people's powers. And so right now for Emma Frost, she can't use her powers at the moment to fight against both Hemingway and also Marrow. But the reason why they're going after Leech is because Leech hid. He did not help the fellow Morlocks to fight against the Marauders when they were being massacred. But luckily for Emma Frost, her students are trying their best to make their way over to her. And so you have Sync being able to use his powers as a way to track down other mutants nearby. And so for him, he's trying his best to track down Hemingway or possibly Emma Frost or anybody else in that building. Now for Skin, he's with Artie. And we kind of see that Skin does not like Kiss at all. But for Artie, he's really attached to Skin. But either way, you have our young heroes trying their best to make it over to their teacher. Now, back at the school, you still have Chambers trying to be that good guy, taking care of Paige, even though Paige is, currently drunk. And so while you have Chambers trying to help her back into her room, we kind of see the two characters getting close to one another to the point where you have Paige wanting to kiss Chambers. And this is going to lead into the ending of this chapter. And you're going to be surprised what actually happens when Paige tries to kiss him. But as we transition back over to Emma Frost, you have Emma Frost ask Meryl, like, hey, listen, why did you guys kill off that group of humans back in that building? Now, we saw that in an earlier storyline over in Uncanny X-Men and X-Men where you had Archangel find a bunch of dead bodies. There were people who lost their souls to a character known as Vessel. Now, the reason why to Meryl, because they were humans, but also because they were still able to party and dance in the sunlight, unlike her ancestors, of course, talking about the Morlocks once again. Now, for our heroes, they're trying to figure out how in the world are they going to be able to save Emma Frost, because technically they can't at the moment, because with them now being in that room with Leech, their powers have also been canceled out as well. And so technically they're sitting ducks at the moment. But this kind of shows why Emma Frost is such a cool character, but also like why she's a teacher and they are the students. Because for Emma Frost, she lets Marrow and also Hemingway continue to talk about, why they are here. They're here to kill off humans because humans did bad things to their ancestors, but also they came here to kill off Leech because Leech was one of the few mutants who was a Morlock who did not help out other Morlocks when it came to the Mutant Massacre. But the thing is, while they are talking, you have Emma Frost. It's so messed up, but you have Emma Frost just knock Leech out by kicking him right in the face. But with Leech being knocked out, it now allows her to use her powers. She's able to be free. She's able to take down both Marrow and Hemingway just like that in a matter of seconds. Now, you have the students walk into the room kind of like, okay, cool, I guess the day is saved. Now, the question is, what do we do with them? Now, of course, you have some kids say, you know what? Go ahead and hand them over to the police. But you have Skin realize for Emma Frost, she has a different plan in mind, especially because she wants some payback for what they did to her, but also because what they did to security guards earlier in the storyline. Now, we kind of find out that Dark Beast is watching our heroes. And for Dark Beast, he kind of realized that he does not want to figure out who he is just yet or what the whole idea of G Nation is about. And so you have Dark Beast go out of his way to kind of blow up the building to hopefully kill off Emma Frost and her students, but to also kind of allow Merrill Hemingway to get away. Now, luckily for our heroes, they were able to, get away from the explosion before they were killed off. Now, at the very last second, you do have Monet reappear, and you have Monet kind of help out with the rescue and allow our heroes and Emma Frost to escape. But for Merrill and Hemingway, they also got away as well. But we're also kind of left to wonder, like, what's going on with Monet, because this is now the second time where she just froze in place, not being able to move nor speak. But either way, you didn't have our heroes leave. Now, you do have our heroes head over to the school of Charles Xavier, the one in Westchester. Now, when they arrive, it's really more of Emma Frost expressing how concerned she is about Gene Nation, how the X-Men, X-Force, all the different X-teams should be really scared about the idea of Gene Nation, because we have no idea what their end goal truly is just yet, especially with Dark Beast being around. Now, we do lead into my favorite moment of the storyline, because you now have Jubilee being able to see Wolverine, because when he came to Wolverine, he left the X-Men right after you had Fatal Attractions happen, where the adamantium was ripped off his bones by Magneto. And so when that happened, he left the X-Men for a short period of time. But when he came back, she left the X-Men and went to go join Generation X as a way to learn more about her abilities. And so when it came to Wolverine, when he came home, she wasn't there. This is the first time these two characters are able to talk to one another. And when they do, it's beautiful because they have that father and daughter-like bond with one another. And I know for a lot of fans out there, he has that bond with Kitty Pryde as well, and I guess Rogue as well. But for me personally, I feel like Jubilee and Wolverine truly do have that father and daughter bond. Kitty Pryde too, yes, but for me it feels like Jubilee is like a daughter to him for real. And also, in later books down the road, we get more examples of that. And so you have Logan Teller that he's proud of her like a father because of, her wanting to learn more about her abilities, to be able to use her abilities better to help out the teams down the road. But his chapter does end on one heck of a cliffhanger, because you do have just Banshee walking around the school and he realized there's something going on with Gateway. But then out of nowhere, there is an explosion that happens at the school. Matter of fact, in the room where Husk and Chambers were at earlier. Now, as we transition into the 7th issue, we're kind of skipping forward in time a little bit, like a couple of days after the ending of the 6th issue. And don't worry, we're going to learn more about what exactly happened at the end of the last issue. But for right now, we're going to jump forward to the 7th one. And so we pick up with Banshee just having a nightmare. Now, with this nightmare, is him kind of reliving a moment where he was supposed to save a young woman's life. But apparently he could not do that. But also there was somebody else there who's technically the killer of that woman. And we have no idea who this person could truly be. Now, you do have Banshee go out of his way to shoot the man. But after doing that, you didn't have Emma Frost appear in his dream. And she's trying her best to wake him up for a very good reason. Because we learn here that Emma Frost and Banshee are currently living together. And here's the reason why. Because at the end of our last chapter, with that explosion, it happened in the girls' dorms. And so their dorms right now are being fixed up. And so unfortunately for Emma Frost, she had to give up her home to the girls stay in for the time being. But she moved in with Banshee. And so right now, the two of them are living together. But with them being so close to one another, when it comes to Banshee, with his dreams, it pulled her into his dreams because she is a psychic. Now, you also have Emma kind of ask Banshee like, hey, listen, is there something you want to talk about? And he says no. And so for her, she kind of moves on. But she also gives him a small glimpse of her, body with no clothes on. But now we can kind of see what's going on with Chambers. We do learn that the reason why the explosion happened earlier is because, well, you had Paige Husk try to kiss him. And so he kind of freaked out and his powers, well, went off and caused an explosion. Now, he's very upset because he should know how to control his powers better than that, but also because he could have hurt Husk as well. But luckily for Husk, she had used her abilities as a way to protect herself from the blast. And so he's very upset about the idea that he could have killed somebody. But also we learn here that he had covered for Husk. He didn't tell Banshee nor Emma Frost that one, she was drunk, and two, the reason why he freaked out because she was trying to kiss him. Now she does appear and she does apologize to him, but we're kind of getting the idea of the possibility of these two characters getting together. But also for Chambers, he kind of feels like there's no way Paige would actually be with him, because he looked like a monster. But the thing is, Paige wants to be with him. And so, again, we're kind of seeing the idea of these two characters becoming a couple. Now, we also see that Jubilee was watching over both Husk and also Chambers while they're having that conversation from her new room, her temporary room. But while watching over them, we come to find out her current roommate is also Monet. Now, these two characters, they don't get along. But for Jubilee, she realized that Monet is looking at some kind of book. Now, for Monet, she does not want to show Jubilee at all what she's looking at. But for Jubilee, she has to know. And so she tries her best to pull the pages or the book out of Monet's hand. Unfortunately, it rips. And we come to find out it's a bunch of kids' drawings that seem very special to Monet. And Monet gets very upset with the idea that one, Jubilee now knows, and two, they got ripped. And so you have Monet grab the papers and fly out. And you have Husk walk into the room to tell Jubilee what she did was basically wrong. Now, I want to jump over to Skin and also Sync because you have the two characters at the moment building a treehouse for both Artie and also Leech. Now, for those two young characters, they have now officially joined the school, but it's Sync and Skin saying like they're still kids. They need somewhere to play at. So, hey, here's a treehouse for them. Now, with this conversation, we also learned that for Skin, he didn't have a good life growing up, that apparently he was always on the run. Him and his friends, they were trying their best to stay alive, but to also prevent the idea of burying one another. And so we're kind of left to wonder what kind of life Skin had growing up. But for right now, we have no idea. Now, back in Ireland, we see some random woman walk into the bar. And when she does, she asks to, use the phone. We do learn her name is Miss O'Brien, but apparently she has to use the phone to call someone, to call Mr. Cassidy, better known as Banshee. But now we have to transition over to Gateway. Now for Gateway, we don't know the actual reason why he's there to school just yet, but we do know here that he is the mentor for Monet. And so for Monet, she's kind of wondering like, how much longer do they have to stay there to school for? And also, when he's going to train her when it comes to her powers. Now, unfortunately for her, he does not give her any answers at all at the moment, but he does tell her like, come here, sit with me, and let's both meditate together. And they both do. Now, we kind of see that Banshee and Emma Frost are able to have a conversation with one another. And this conversation is really important because it begins the idea of the two characters feeling like they can go to one another. Because you have Emma Frost tell Banshee that she feels bad with the idea of not being more open when he needs somebody to talk to when it came to his nightmares. But it's also her kind of telling him that she feels bad for what she had did to Leech. Because Leech is a young boy, but at the same time, she had no choice there. But while you have the two characters talking to one another, you didn't have Banshee be informed that he has a phone call. So he goes out of his way to answer the phone. And apparently that same one we saw earlier is calling Banshee to tell him that apparently his family castle had just disappeared. And we have no idea where it went to. And so this is where we're going to enter So occasionally, I always find like different books that I truly do love and care so much for. And when it comes to Uncanny X-Men issue number 325, I really do like this book a lot. Now, the art is not the greatest, but it's not the worst. But the reason why I like it so much is because it shows how dangerous Storm can be. Now, technically, we already seen so many times how dangerous Storm can be, but it kind of shows that Storm does not need her powers to be dangerous, that she is great when it comes to hand-to-hand combat. And guys, the ending of the storyline is beautiful. Now, we're also getting into the idea of Gene Nation finally attacking the X-Men, finally making their moves against the human race. Now, to kind of save time on me explaining what Gene Nation truly is, I kind of want to save that for the later parts of this video. And the reason why, because there's going to be a certain character going to be used as a way to explain things to us when it comes to Gene Nation. And so as we dive into the opening pages of this one singular issue, we're seeing the X-Men just playing baseball. If you know your X-Men comics, you already know they love the idea of relaxing by playing baseball. Now, sometimes it's just chilling at the pool or other kinds of activities, but a lot of times it comes down to baseball. And it's kind of cool because it's not just the X-Men. You also have Generation X there as well. So it's kind of cool to see these two teams coming together to play baseball. Really, by the end of this section, things go south very quickly because you have the different characters begin to use their abilities in the middle of the game. And one of the rules is you cannot use your powers when it comes to baseball. But unfortunately, it ends up as a mess, as it always does. But right after the baseball game had ended, you didn't have Wolverine realize that they're about to have some company. And that company is Callisto and also Colossus as they come through a portal. Now, let's not forget, for Colossus, by this point in the Marvel timeline, he had left the X-Men and he had joined Magneto's side. Now, in a previous storyline, Avalon, the space base that Magneto had built, was completely destroyed. And so for Colossus, he took an escape pod to go back down to Earth with Magneto. The problem is that when he woke up, he was found by Callisto, but Magneto was missing. But for Callisto, she needs his help. She needs the X-Men help when it comes to Gene Nation. Now, also, I want to remind you guys that Callisto and Colossus, they do somewhat have feelings for one another. It's very small, but we did see in the past these two characters being able to build a bond with one another. But while you have all that happening, back in the city, New York City, on a subway train, you have the power go out. And this kind of shows us that, hey, Gene Nation is now beginning to make their moves against the humans, against the X-Men. It all starts here. Here comes the big battle between the X-Men and the Gene Nation group. Now, with Callisto waking up, we can use her as a way to learn the actual origin of Gene Nation as she tells the X-Men the origin as well. Because we learn here that, well, you know what? This is a callback really to an earlier storyline. Because in an earlier storyline, you had Mikkel, the older brother of Colossus, kind of go crazy and kill off the Morlocks. Or technically, we were left to believe that. Come to find out, that's not the case at all. What Mikkel did was he had opened up a portal to a different dimension. And so for the Morlocks who were in the tunnels with him at that time, they went into a different dimension. Now, apparently to Callisto here, Mikkel was unable to make it over to this other dimension, but the Morlocks did. And the Morlocks were able to build a life for themselves until the second generation came in. They were very upset about the idea that the Morlocks had to leave their old home to be able to make a home somewhere else for themselves. They wanted to go back to Earth and get revenge against the people who had basically force them out. And of course, they're going after the humans. But at the same time, they're doing this on a very special night, the anniversary of the mutant massacre. That was the first event we ever covered. The whole idea of the Marauders going into the tunnels of the Morlocks and just killing off Morlocks left and right. And so what they're going to do right now, G Nation, is to kidnap a bunch of humans as a way to kill them on the anniversary of when they had to see a massacre happen in their tunnels. It's them believing they're doing the right thing. But now we got to put a pause on that and jump over to Gambit. Here's the reason why, because for Gambit, this section alone is going to lead into another storyline we're going to cover in a different video. But for Gambit, he had kissed Rogue. Now, the only reason why he kissed Rogue because back in Legion Quest, you had our heroes believe the world was going to end. And so for Rogue and Gambit, they say, you know what? If the entire universe is going to die, then let's go ahead and kiss for the first and last time. And they did. Now, the universe did not die technically, thanks to Bishop, but with that kiss, it put him in a coma. But it allowed Rogue to go into his mind, to see things. And so what she saw scared her and made her run away. Now, you had Bobby go with her, but they've been on a road trip ever since. And so you have Rogue call to the school and Gambit answers. Now for Gambit, his goal is to find Rogue, to have a conversation with her because he knows that she knows something dark about him. But for Rogue, she does not want to talk to him at all. And she hangs the phone up. And so while you have Gambit trying to deal with that, you have the rest of the X-Men trying to deal with the whole Callisto and G Nation thing. And we do learn here that for Callisto, she had taken some of the X-Men with her into the tunnels of the Morlocks. They had just teleported over there. But you have another group using the Blackbird to catch up. Now for Archangel, he was there that night or the day of the mutant massacre. And let's not forget, it was the same event where he lost his wings and of course began the process of him becoming Archangel. And so the whole idea of going back into the tunnels on the same night he lost his wings is getting to him. It's messing with his mind. And then for a brief moment, we see Sinister getting involved in the storyline for like one page, where he's being informed that two Blackbirds had just left Charles Xavier's school. One of them, of course, heading over to Manhattan. The other one is heading over to Seattle. That second one is Gambit. And again, it leads into another storyline. Now we do learn who's on Callisto's team. You have Storm, Colossus, and also Wolverine. But as they're walking around, you have Callisto bring up the fact that she believes that Storm failed as a leader. And here's the reason why, because there was an earlier storyline where you had Storm and Callisto fight against one another. Now in that battle, Storm won. But the thing was, Storm was not going to stay down there with the Morlocks. And she asked Callisto to take her place as leader while she is gone. So technically Storm is still leader, but Callisto, I can't believe I just said Callisto. But Callisto, she was the one left in charge of the Morlocks. But it's her saying like, hey Storm, if you were down here and took your role more seriously, then most likely none of this would have happened. But it's Colossus saying there's no point in blaming Storm for what happened because we have no idea what could have happened if Storm did stay down here with the Morlocks. There could have been a better outcome or an even worse outcome. And so for Callisto, she kind of realized what Colossus is saying. There's no point in blaming Storm for what's happening right now because there are so many other factors in play at the moment. But while you have our heroes walking around, they don't realize that they're being watched by G Nation. Now, when it comes to G Nation, they're being led by a character known as Marrow. Now, when it comes to Marrow, we met her a long time ago as a young girl. As a matter of fact, you had Cable helped her out, but then she had disappeared because she went into that other dimension and stayed there for 20 years, but came out. But either way, she is the leader of G Nation, this second generation of Morlocks who are trying to get revenge. But while you have our heroes continue continuing to walk around, you didn't have our heroes be attacked by the different members of Gene Nation. Now, for our heroes, they fought against the different members of Gene Nation in the past. They feel like they know how to handle them. But you have Callisto say, nah. When you fought them in the past, they were holding back to learn more about you. And now because they know more about you, they'll go ahead and go all out against you guys. And so now it's an actual challenge for our heroes. Now, for Callisto, she also realized what they're trying to do. Split the team up to make it easier to take down the different members of this team. And so you have Storm and Callisto agree to stay together. Now, for Callisto and Storm, they do see a crowd of people just running out of one of the tunnels of the Morlocks. But you have Callisto stop the last one to ask him what in the world is going on. And you had this guy say like, hey, listen, I have no idea what's going on, but they had just released us. Matter of fact, it's the girl with bones. And of course, he's talking about Marrow. But you didn't have that same guy pull a gun out and shoot Callisto because this guy was being controlled by Sack. And we had talked about Sack before. He has the ability to take over your body. Once he does, you're dead, but he can still use your body however he wants to. And so he was able to use this person's body to shoot Callisto and now has a gun pointed to Storm's head. And it kind of seems like Storm is going to die. And Storm knows Sack very well, but you have Storm being able to use her abilities to protect herself. Now for Callisto, it still kind of shows that Storm is weak because she did not kill off Sack. But you didn't have our heroes be confronted by Marrow. Now, when it comes to Marrow, she's here to battle against Storm because she blames Storm for being a bad leader. Because for Gene Nation, it's the whole idea of, hey, we lost our home because of the massacre. We lost our home again because some guy named Mikhail pushed us into a different reality. But in both times, you know what we were missing? A great leader, because Storm was never around to truly protect us, to truly lead us. And so for her, she looks at Storm as a failure. She looks at Callisto as a failure because Callisto was Storm's replacement when Storm was away from the Morlocks. Now for Storm, she's kind of like, listen, I offer you guys a home with the X-Men. You guys turned down that offer. But for Marrow here, it's kind of like, what's your point? You wanted us to leave our home to go up there to live in the world with them? Basically talking about the humans, the group of people who hate mutants left and right and have been trying to kill off mutants left and right. Now we also learn here that for Marrow, she still has some prisoners, and those prisoners, they have bombs attached to their bodies. Here comes the big catch. You see, on her heart is the detonator. And so as her heartbeat goes closer and closer, those bombs are going to go off, killing those people. And so if Storm wants to save those people, she has to kill off Marrow to stop her heart from beating. And so now we're getting into the idea of seeing Storm and also Marrow have a knife fight. And this is why I say you should never challenge Storm. You should never mess with Storm. Because the thing is, when it comes to people in the comic book world, they believe that Storm is weak. Why? Because Storm is a hero. Storm is an X-Men. She's not going to kill anybody, is what they believe. But if Storm has no choice, if you push her into that corner, what's going to happen? You're going to have Storm do the exact opposite in what you believe she's going to do. And so you have Storm show Marrow like, no, you push me into a corner. I have to kill you as a way to save those people's lives. And technically, you have Marrow try her best to cheat. And you have the X-Men also wanting to cheat to help out Storm. But Storm said, no. We're going to do this right. I'm going to show her I don't need to cheat. I'm going to show her why I won the right to be leader of the Morlocks. And so you have Storm being able to just kill off Marrow. Just like that. Her heartbeat stops and the bomb stops as well. The day is technically saved. And so with the day technically being saved now, you didn't have Callisto be the one to help the X-Men capture the rest of Gene Nation, and they're gonna go to some kind, I guess, special prison that she has for them. Now, before she does leave, she does kiss Colossus goodbye. And when she does, it's kind of like that small hope of the possibility of these two characters getting together, because for Kitty Pryde over in Excalibur, she moved on to somebody different. Now, with all that being said, you also have Colossus saying, hey, listen, there's no way I'm still going to stay with the X-Men. Like, I still believe being an X-Men is wrong for me. And so you have Colossus leave just like that. Now, for Storm, she hates the idea that she killed off somebody who did not have a chance to live a life because she was so young. But the thing is, for Logan, he's telling her, you had no choice, because honestly, we're trying to make the world a better place. And sometimes when doing that, you have to cross the line, because this world is so cruel. It turns humans and mutants into monsters. And unfortunately, we as the X-Men have to handle those monsters the best we can. And so it's him saying, like, you had no choice. You had to kill her, Storm. And the book kind of ends on that note right there. So okay, so for X-Men 45, I have to say I kind of like this book a lot because it's not all action-packed. It's not your usual comic where, hey, you know what? We have heroes fighting against villains. One of those issues where we're going to sit down, kind of focus on a relationship between two different characters. And today is going to be Rogue and also Gambit. Now, this is kind of building off what we saw at the end of Legion Quest, but also some videos that took place after Age of Apocalypse. Let me explain. So when it came to Legion Quest, as we all know, it was Legion going back in time to kill off Magneto. Homeboy failed. He killed off Charles Xavier, and of course, it almost wiped out the entire universe. Now, thanks to Bishop, that did not happen. You had Bishop be able to go back in time, stop Legion, and allow the old timeline to come back into the picture. The problem was that before you had Legion do anything at all, you had Rogue and Gambit kiss, because they believed that the entire universe was going to die. And technically it did, but thanks to Bishop, it came back to life again, allowing our heroes to continue on with their lives. But for Rogue and Gambit, they kiss, and it put Gambit into a coma. And so with that coma, it kind of allowed Rogue to dive into his mind to see a few things, but also kind of pick up on some emotions he has when it comes to certain things around the world. And so as we get into X-Men issue number 45, we're really picking up with Rogue going crazy. And the reason why, because for Rogue, she has a hard time kind of dealing with other people's emotions after she had absorbed them, including what they had done in the past, their memories. And so for Rogue, we see her having a hard time processing everything Gambit feels, but also how she feels as well, but also what he had done in the past, his dark secrets. Now, when it came to Rogue, she left on a road trip with Iceman, and for Iceman, it's more of like watching over her. But at the same time, he wants to know what she saw in the mind of Gambit. Now, for Rogue, she's not telling none of Gambit's secrets, but it's her still having a hard time processing her own feelings, but also his as well, his dark secrets. And so you have Rogue tell Bobby, like, listen, I can't tell you what I saw. The thing is, we have to head over to Seattle, to one precise location, because for some reason for Gambit, he hates that area for some strange reason. But now we get Gambit involved. Now for Gambit, by this point in the timeline, he had woke up from his coma. But for Gambit, his main goal is to head over to where Rogue is at. He knows that Rogue and Bobby are currently in Seattle. And so for Gambit, he's trying his best to get over to her so that they can have that conversation. He's kind of worried about what she possibly knows now about him. But now we jump over to a bar outside of Washington University. Now, for Rogue, it's her trying to still process her own feelings, but also Gambit. Now, for Rogue, her feelings is more the idea that she hates her powers, because when she kissed Gambit, it was nice, but at the same time, it put him in a coma. And that was only like her second kiss between somebody she actually cared for. And so for Rogue, she kind of feels like her powers will always be hunting over her. That with her powers, she'll never have the ability to be in love, to have a relationship. And so when she goes into this bar, all the guys want to be with her. All the guys want to dance, kiss, hang out with her, all that stuff. But you have Bobby walk in and say, hey guys, listen, she off limits. And for Rogue, she hates the idea of Bobby getting in her way. But it's Bobby saying your powers are dangerous. But at the same time, let's go ahead and go back home so that we can find a way to help you, to find a way to see if you can find a way to control your powers. But the problem for Rogue is she's been at this too long. She had too many people over the years kind of force her to do what they want to do. It's not up to her ever. And so you have Rogue just leave after damaging the entire bar. Now, Gambit does arrive. When Gambit arrives, he's kind of like, oh man, it's a cool image. He just walks in like, Bobby, Drake, where is Rogue? You're like, oh, is Bobby in trouble? But technically he's not, because we already know for Gambit, his main mission right now is to just find Rogue, to kind of work things out with her. And that's really it. Now, you also have the book give us a brief moment to remind us that right now between mutants and humans, things are going to pop off very soon where we could possibly see a war happening. And the reason why, because of two things, the legacy virus and Gen Nation. Now, we already talked about both things. Legacy virus being a virus that came from the far future thanks to Strife to kill off mutants, but it had mutated. And now it's going after humans as well. And so for the humans, they're blaming mutants for the possibility of them dying if they do get the virus. Now, on top of that, you had Gene Nation attack recently, a group of mutants who are spin-offs of Morlocks who kidnapped a bunch of humans and had planned to kill them on the anniversary of the mutant massacre. And so for Graydon Creed, the son of Sabretooth and also Mystique, who's not a mutant, just a regular human, he loves the ideas of all of these different factors now being put into play, because his main goal is to kill off the mutant race. And with more and more humans kind of agreeing that mutants are a problem, for Graydon, everything is working out perfectly. Because now you have this guy who's most likely like Clay's assistant is telling Clay, hey dude, listen, you know what you should do right now? Run for president of the United States of America, because now that'll give you more power to hopefully achieve the goals that you are trying to achieve. Now, the rest of the book is really more of us seeing Rogue and Gambit being able to reunite. And you would think, okay, cool. With him being there, maybe he'll be able to talk to her. He'll then be able to explain things to her and work through their problems. But for Rogue, it's the whole thing that she needs some time alone. And the reason why, because again, she can't touch people. Like what Gambit offered her, what Gambit showed her is everything she wanted. The idea of a man in her life, being in her corner, being able to be held by him, to kiss him, hug him, to be anything she wants with him. But the problem is her powers are preventing that from actually happening. But at the same time, it's the trust that she had now lost in Gambit because what she has saw in his mind. Now, technically, the book does not tell us what Rogue saw in his mind. But again, it's Gambit saying, but I want to be there for you. I want to be in your corner and break down those barriers of fear that you have put up around you. I want to break down those barriers of you being scared of me or your powers. Like, I want to be there. And so for Gambit, he's kind of wondering, was he ever enough for her to kind of show her that what they have can survive? And the problem for Rogue is, he is. He is everything she wanted. He has showed her everything that she wanted. It's just, again, the fear of her powers, the fear of being hurt. And so you have Rogue tell Bobby, tell Gambit that she's leaving the X-Men. Now, it's not forever, but she needs some time alone to kind of work through her problems. And so she leaves. Now, right after she leaves, you didn't have Gambit say, hey, Bobby, I'll be gone for a few days. Now, it's him saying like a day or two, I'll be back home, don't worry. But for Rogue, it could be weeks until we see her back on the X-Men team. But to close on today's video, we see Gambit just walking around minding his business because he truly believes that he's alone at the moment. There's no one following him, except he is completely wrong because we kind of find out he has been followed by Mr. Sinister. Now, this is a callback to our previous video over in Uncanny X-Men 325. In that issue alone, you had Sinister be informed that Gambit had just went over to Seattle. And so for Sinister, he wanted to have a one-on-one conversation with him to say, hey man, listen, I want to tell you this right here, that you and I have some unfinished business, kind of hinting at the idea that these two characters had worked together in the past. But it's him saying, you are unable to escape your past. As a matter of fact, the cards I gave you, the hand you've been dealt with, will soon come to play very soon. And then you're going to question your actual role in the X-Men. And so with that being said, this is where we're going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later. Okay, so we're now kind of, for me personally, beginning the process of the return of Sabretooth. And let me explain, because for the character of Sabretooth, as we all know by this point in Marvel Comics, for Charles Xavier, he had truly believed that he could change the mind of Sabretooth, turn the man into a better person. And so for a good while there, for Sabretooth, he was staying with the X-Men. Now, technically, everything that Charles was doing was not really working, but on top of that, you had Wolverine stab the mind of Sabretooth, which kind of turned him into a different type of character because of the brain damage. So right now for Sabretooth, he's acting more like an animal pet. But as his mind slowly heals up, we're getting closer and closer to the return of good old-fashioned Sabretooth. But here's the thing, because for me personally, I kind of feel like what Gambit does in this issue alone is kind of the reason why we get the return of Sabretooth. And you see what I mean as we go through this particular issue. But this issue does pick up after you had Rogue officially leave the X-Men. So we're kind of getting into that era where we're going to see different people be put on the X-Men to replace some X-Men members as they leave the team. So for Rogue, with her leaving, we could technically say that Cannonball is her replacement. Now, that being said, for Gambit, he knows the reason why Rogue left, because when it came to Gambit and Rogue, they had kissed because they had believed the entire universe was going to die thanks to the character better known as Legion. Now, as we all know, that storyline led into Age of Apocalypse. But either way, you had Bishop being able to technically save the entire universe. So that kiss was somewhat important, but technically pointless. With Rogue kissing Gambit, it allowed her to look into his mind. And so she had absorbed a lot of things he had locked away in his mind, some very dark secrets. So because of those dark secrets, it made her run away. And so for Gambit, for the time being, it's just him wanting to be alone, because now he knows his dark secrets are basically coming out slowly. And sooner or later, the entire X-Men are going to know what's going on with Gambit. Now, with all that being said, you do have Storm come to Gambit, because for Storm and Gambit, they're like best friends. It was Storm who brought Gambit into the X-Men. And so it's her making sure that her friend is okay. Now, for Gambit, he wants to be left alone, but he also kind of realized that Storm is also going through a few things as well, because back in the G Nation storyline, when it came to Storm, she had no choice. She had to go ahead and kill off the character known as Meryl to save the lives of innocent people. And so for Storm, she's not really used to the idea of taking people's lives unless she really has to. And so she was kind of hoping to find a way to not do it. But as we all know, unfortunately, unfortunately, she had no choice. But you do have the two characters kind of reestablish that close bond they have with one another and wanting to be there for one another with what they're going through. But now we have to switch over to the World Health Organization, better known as WHO. And the reason why, because we pick up with Charles Xavier and Beast having a meeting with those people about the legacy virus. I just realized that it has technically been a short period of time where we have not talked about the legacy virus. There was a point where almost every single video I had to mention the legacy virus. But either way, back in X-Men Prime, you had Trish Tilby tell the entire world about the legacy virus. And of course, you had people just freaking out left and right because originally this virus was only going after mutants. And that was really it until Moira McTaggart, a human who had gotten the legacy virus. And so right now for Trish Tilby, with her telling the entire world, you have everyone wondering if they should freak out. Now for Charles Xavier and Beast, they're trying their best to keep everyone calm by technically lying, like saying like, hey, listen, yes, there is this brand new virus, but at the same time, there's only been like 8 to 9 cases. 8 of those cases belongs to mutants and 1 belongs to a human. And so we really have no actual reason to freak out just yet. But then you have Renee Machcomb, and I really hope I pronounced that last name correctly, get out of her chair and bring up Genosha. We had saw Renee back in Cable issue number 23. Now for Renee, she left Genosha to come over to America to express her concerns about the legacy virus. And so she is technically very upset with Charles Xavier because right now he's trying to downplay the whole idea of the virus by saying like, yeah, guys, listen, there was 300 cases over in Genosha because at that point in time, the X-Men had just helped the country out by allowing mutants to be free in that country, but then out of nowhere, they all got sick. But they had assumed it was because of the legacy virus. It's Charles saying, what if we are completely wrong? What if it's not the legacy virus? Because there was an entire process that y'all used back in Genosha to force mutants to become slaves. What if that process gave them a new kind of virus that only affects them? Because again, they're from Genosha. It's Charles on his best to lie about the actual cases or number of cases of the legacy virus. Now, while this meeting is going on, you have Excalibur watching this meeting, especially because of Moira McTaggart, because she's the only human right now who has the virus. Now, for Excalibur, they kind of believe that for this virus, it's no longer really acting like a virus. Instead, it's acting like a designer gene, meaning that it was engineered to do a very particular goal for somebody who had made the virus. And so for Moira McTaggart, she believes that yes, the legacy virus is a virus, but not really. It was designed to do one particular goal, which seems like wiping out the mutant race or possibly the entire Earth. But as we jump back over to the school of Charles Xavier, we get reminded that there was Boom Boom, who was the only X character who was trying her best to take care of Sabretooth. Out of all the other X characters, they're kind of like, we'll keep our distance. But for Boom Boom, she felt bad for him because when she looks at him, she sees a man who's kind of lost in his mind, who's acting like a pet right now. And so she's trying her best to kind of hopefully see him turn into a better person and kind of remove away from this whole idea of acting like a pet, really. And so she gets very upset by it. Now, this leads into X-Force number 48 that we're going to cover very soon on the channel. But right after you have Boom Boom leave, you then have Gambit arrive in the Danger Room with Sabretooth. And the reason why, because for Gambit, there is a huge connection between these two characters. Now, we do know one of the connections, but there's more between them that we have not officially learned just yet. But for Gambit, he wants to make sure that Sabretooth never does forget about his past. But while you have Sabretooth kind of going through Gambit's process, back in San Francisco, you have Beast he begins to hate the idea of what they just did. You know, the idea of lying at how big the legacy virus truly is. Now, he does meet up with Charles Xavier, and we're seeing Charles Xavier right now feeling powerless because now he's beginning to doubt himself once again. Now, we have seen this before in the earlier parts of our coverage over the X-Men, but this is a tad bit different. And let me explain, because for Charles Xavier, he's kind of doubting the idea of trying to bring in Sabretooth, but also how to handle the legacy virus. He kind of feels like he's playing with fire. Now for Beast, he does tell Charles like, hey, you're overreacting, but this conversation does kind of lead into a different angle. But first, we have to go ahead and jump back over to Gambit. Because for Gambit, what he is trying to do at the moment is to make Sabretooth relive all the different moments where he had killed people for no actual good reason, just mindless killing. It's him saying like, you killed off this person and this person and this person for no good reason. Now for Sabretooth, because currently right now his mind is more of like, you know, oh, house pet or an innocent person, he hates the idea of what he's seeing at the moment, seeing all of these different images of people that he had hurt. But his Gambit is saying, no matter how you evolved into a better person, no matter how hard you try to get away from your past, I'm going to be there to remind you of every single thing that you have done wrong in this world. Now Storm comes in and she's like, hey, stop all of this mess. And Gambit does. But before he does leave, he makes sure that Sabretooth goes right back in the cage and he walks away. But to close on today's video, we jump back over to that conversation between Beast and Charles Xavier. And I love the ending to this book because for Charles Xavier, is him wondering like, what makes Sabretooth tick? Is it a whole idea that because he's a mutant, was his mutation the reason why he became a killer, or possibly his behavior? Now for Beast, he kind of does play with the idea of like, yeah, we could say it is genetics because, hey, you know what? Look at Wolverine. Like Wolverine is slowly turning into a savage character. But at the same time though, can we actually use that as an excuse? What if it's because of his behavior? Because for Sabretooth, he loves what he does. He loves the idea of killing people. That's more behavior rather than genetics. But also it's him saying like the X-Men are not trying to excuse the past of Sabretooth. Their main goal is to help him become a better person, but also make him remember that you were a horrible person in your past. And so for Beast, he's saying, if Sabretooth is pure evil, that makes us pure good. But at the same time, we got to make sure that with him being pure evil, he does not change our behavior at all. Make sure we stay on the right path. Now for Beast, it's not really him saying like the X-Men are just good people and that is it. No, but when you sit down and compare yourself to Sabretooth, then technically you are a pure good person. And for Charles Xavier, he needed to hear that. But the book ends on that note right there. So guys, see y'all the next X-Men or next comic book video. Later, guys.